Tonight we enter the final hour before sunrise, in the low country between the rivers, where darkness seems to thicken rather than fade. In the ruins of ancient southern Mesopotamia, archaeologists have found tablets from cities like Nippur, and Uruk, places studied by scholars at museums and universities across the world. At the British Museum, thousands of cuneiform tablets still preserve prayers, omens, rituals, and ordinary accounts of grain, sheep, doors, debts, and fear. The University of Pennsylvania excavations at Nippur also revealed how deeply temple life shaped the Sumerian world. You are not asked to believe every shadow. You're asked only to listen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows quieter, you may leave your location and local time below, so the night knows where you are listening from. Now you stand in that last dark hour. The world has not yet turned gold. The reeds beyond the canal are black lines against a colourless sky. Somewhere, water moves softly through a channel cut by human hands, carrying silt, insects, and the faint smell of river mud. The air is cool enough to touch the skin with a strange gentleness. Though everyone knows the heat will return, the city waits. You can feel the mudbrick walls around you holding yesterday's warmth, though their outer faces are damp with night. A dog shifts in an alley. A clay door socket groans as someone inside a house wakes too early and regrets it immediately, which is perhaps the most human sound in history. The streets are narrow, pressed between walls made from earth, straw, and patient labour. Above them rises the temple platform, layered and silent, like a mountain, built by people who lived on a flat plain. Records confirm that the Sumerians built some of the earliest known cities in human history, with Uruk becoming one of the great urban centres of the 4th millennium before the Common Era. Archaeologists from major research institutions have long studied how writing, accounting, temples, and labour system appeared there with unusual force. Yet these facts do not make the city feel modern. They make it feel stranger, because here, bureaucracy and mystery sleep in the same bed. A tablet can count barley. A chant can plead with a god. Both are serious. During the final hour before sunrise, the Sumerian imagination entered a dangerous borderland. Night was not only the absence of light, it was a condition in which normal order weakened. A person lying asleep was not fully defended. A door was not merely wood. A threshold was not merely a strip of packed earth beneath the feet. These small places became charged, because they belonged to more than one realm. The threshold is always suspicious. A doorway belongs to inside and outside. A bed belongs to waking and dreaming. The horizon belongs to heaven and earth. The hour before sunrise belongs to night and day, yet fully to neither. That is where fear gathers, not because people are foolish, but because humans have always noticed that endings are unsecure. The last moment of anything feels thin. You hear sandals scuff somewhere near the temple court. The sound is soft, then gone. Perhaps a priest is awake, or a servant carrying oil, or a guard pretending not to be afraid. The scent of extinguished lamp smoke lingers in the air, mixed with wool, sweat, dust, and old offerings. Even the gods, you suspect, must be tired at this hour. Sumerian religion was not built from gentle abstractions. It lived in food, statues, water, incense, music, labour, and fear. The gods had houses. They had attendants. They received meals. They possessed cities, fields, herds, and names. A temple was not only a place where people worshipped, it was an institution with land, workers, storerooms, scribes, and a divine presence at its centre. Oxford and Yale historians have often emphasised that early Mesopotamian Sesquicentennial temples were economic and social powers, not merely sacred monuments. Still, there is scholarly debate over how ordinary people experienced these great systems. Did they feel protected by the temple's rituals, or watched by them? Did they imagine the gods as near companions, distant owners, or unpredictable rulers? The tablets preserve official prayers and learned traditions more clearly than the breathing thoughts of a poor reed cutter at dawn. That substance leaves room for imagination, though it must walk carefully. You walk carefully too. The ground is uneven beneath your feet. It is packed from generations of movement, from donkeys, children, potters, women carrying baskets, men hauling bricks, and scribes who probably believed their sore wrists were a unique tragedy. The sky still holds a few stars. They appear colder here, sharper, as if they've been hammered into place. The moon is low, perhaps only a pale fragment. The eastern edge of the world has not yet opened, and that is the trouble. To many Mesopotamians, the sun was not simply a bright object. The sun was connected with judgment, truth, visibility, and the ordering of life. Later, Akkadian traditions speak of the sun god as a divine judge who sees somewhat hidden things humans prefer to hide. In Sumerian tradition, the solar power called Utu carried similar associations with justice and illumination. When that power had not yet appeared, a moral and cosmic uncertainty remained. The final hour before sunrise was therefore not just inconvenient darkness. It was the last delay before the judge returned to his seat. It was the pause before the world could be inspected again, and in that pause, anything concealed might move, or a fringe tidbit wanders in here like a cat that refuses proper academic discipline. Some modern enthusiasts claim that the Sumerians preserved memories of lost pre-human teachers, star beings, or forgotten rulers from an age before agriculture. Most scholars do not accept such claims, and the tablets are far more earthly than that. They speak of kings, gods, cities, offerings, and labour. Yet the fascination remains understandable, because Sumerian texts often place divine powers and primeval events in a time so deep that ordinary history cannot touch it. Long before recorded history, the imagination says, in a time no one remembers, the story begins. The Sumerians themselves looked backward into sacred beginnings. They told of cities established before floods, kingship descending from heaven, and divine plans older than human certainty. Whether these traditions preserve cultural memory, theological poetry, political imagination, or all three remains openly discussed among researchers. A careful scholar might say the evidence is layered. A sleepy listener might say the layers feel like silt under dark water. You are standing inside those layers now, not as a conqueror, not as a tourist, not as someone holding a flashlight and demanding answers from the dead. You are simply present, breathing in the hour they feared, noticing how fragile a city becomes before the first light touches its walls. A baby coughs inside a house. Someone murmurs a protective phrase. A woman reaches for a charm near the bed. A man wakes from a dream and lies still, trying to decide whether it was nonsense or warning. In a corner, a small lamp has nearly died, its flame bending low as if listening to something under the floor. The last darkness does not need monsters to frighten anyone. It only needs uncertainty. It only needs the sense that the world has not yet been confirmed again. Perhaps this is why the final hour before sunrise mattered. It was the moment when the great systems of Sumer, the temple, the city, the canal, the household, the god, the king, and the sleeping body, all seemed to wait together. Nothing had failed, not yet, but nothing had been restored either. You stand in the dim street, the bricks smell of clay and river, the stars begin to weaken, one by one, like witnesses leaving a court. Somewhere beneath the horizon, the hidden sun travels toward return. Somewhere within the city, people listen for signs. Perhaps they fear demon. Perhaps they fear dreams. Perhaps they fear that morning may come and reveal what the night has already changed. And the eastern sky remains closed. Your mind drifts into the streets of a Sumerian city while the stars are still fading. Nothing here is smooth in the modern sense. The walls lean slightly, the alleys bend without apology, reed mats hang across doorways, and the packed earth beneath your feet holds the prints of sandals, hooves, bare heels, and the small, uncertain marks of children. The city is asleep, but not peacefully asleep. It is the sleep of a crowded place where everyone depends on everyone else, and nobody entirely trusts the dark. The air smells of clay. It also carries the faint sourness of animals, stale beer, fish oil, wool, and canal water. These are not unpleasant scents to the people who live here. They are the ordinary perfume of survival. Somewhere behind a wall, sheep shift in a small courtyard. A donkey exhales as if the entire Bronze Age has disappointed him personally. In another house, a grinding stone rests beside barley flour, waiting for hands that will return when the sky becomes pale enough to work. The streets are narrow because shade matters. Heat rules the day, so the city folds itself inward, making passages where shadows can last. Even in the cool hour before dawn, you can sense the memory of sunlight stored in brick. Southern Mesopotamia is the land of fierce brightness, and every house is in agreement with heat, dust, labour, and the need for water. The rivers give life, but they do not give it politely. Records from excavations at Ur and other ancient cities confirm the use of mudbrick architecture. Courtyard houses, drains, temples, workshops, and crowded neighbourhoods. Archaeologists connected with the University of Pennsylvania and other major institutions helped uncover how dense and organised these early urban worlds could be. The discovery is not merely architectural, it tells you that Sumerian life was deeply communal. People heard one another, they smelled one another's cooking. They knew who woke early, who argued late, and who had enough grain to pretend not to worry. That is city life. Ancient city life is louder than ruins suggest. In daylight, it would be full of traders, potters, reed workers, brewers, children, porters, priests, animals, and the endless practical music of labour. Yet in this dim final darkness, all that movement has withdrawn into walls. The city feels hollowed out. A place made for voices now holds its breath. Above the houses rises the sacred height. The temple complex does not simply sit among the people, it dominates their sense of direction. Its platform is a human-made mountain in a land where real mountains are distant, almost mythical shapes beyond the flat horizon. In a place of river, plain and reed marsh, height becomes a form of authority. The temple can be seen from far away, at night, even when its details vanish, its mass remains. You look toward it, the top is lost against the sky, perhaps a lamp burns somewhere within its court, perhaps a priest has already risen to tend the divine household. The gods of Sumer were not imagined as vague breezes hovering politely above human life. They inhabited statues, temples, rituals, and names. Their presence was cared for through offerings and disciplined service. That care required people, and people required food, schedules, storage rooms, fields, and scribes. A mainstream historical fact emerges quietly from this darkness. The earliest writing in southern Mesopotamia was closely tied to administration, especially the tracking of goods, labour, and offerings. Scholars at Oxford, Chicago, and Yale have all described how cuneiform began as a practical system before becoming a vehicle for myths, hymns, law, and learning. So the first city you wander through is also a city of counting. Its sacred world is filled with numbers. That feels almost funny. In a dry little way, humanity invents writing. And one of the first things it writes is not poetry for the moon, but lists of grain and sheep. Apparently even the dawn of civilization had paperwork. The gods may have been mighty, but someone still had to know where the barley went. A clay tablet can outlive a palace. A receipt can defeat a king. Yet those lists also tell a more delicate story. Every ration entry implies a worker. Every offering record implies a ritual. Every measurement implies anxiety about sufficiency. Food, in Sumer, was not an abstract resource. It was the difference between obedience and unrest, praise and hunger, life and the silence of an empty You pass a doorway sealed by a wooden bar. The surface of the door is rough, perhaps made of palm wood or bundled reed strengthened by craft. The latch looks simple, but its meaning is complex. Inside is family, property, sleep, stored food, and the vulnerable warmth of bodies. Outside is street, stranger, animal, spirit, and rumour. In the hour before sunrise, the door becomes a question. Has it held through the night? Scholars still debate how far the average household participated in informal temple religion, as opposed to personal practices passed through family habits and neighbourhood custom. Some evidence suggests official cults shaped the public rhythm of life. Other evidence hints at smaller domestic fears, charms, and protective gestures that rarely entered grand inscriptions. The debate remains open because the quietest people in history usually leave the fewest words. Still, the houses speak through their shape, the courtyards open to the sky, rooms cluster around family work, and roofs may be used for sleeping in hot months. And the boundary between domestic and cosmic space becomes thin when a person lies beneath the stars. Imagine waking there in darkness, wrapped in woven fabric, hearing the creak of reeds and the far cry of a bird from the marsh. Above you are stars that priests and scholars may study, but to you they are also company and warning. The last hour of night changes the city's surfaces. A storage jar becomes a crouching shape, a doorway looks like an open mouth, a hanging cloth stirs when no hand touches it, a sleeping neighbour coughs, and for a moment the sound seems too close. The miner's a busy craftsperson. It builds fears from scraps. The Sumerians gave names to many unseen forces, but they also lived in a world where practical dangers were real. Theft could happen, fire could spread, floodwater could rise, disease could enter a house without knocking, which is rude even by the standards of invisible affliction. A baby could fail to wake, a traveller could vanish outside the gate. Fear of supernatural danger did not replace ordinary danger. It braided itself around it. A quirky fringe tradition sometimes imagines the Sumerian city as a remnant of a lost golden age, with temple towers functioning as signals to celestial visitors. Serious archaeology does not support that idea. The temple platform is best understood through religion, politics, labour, and landscape. Yet the fantasy clings to something real, to anyone approaching from the plain. The raised sanctuary must have looked like a message to heaven. The city was always looking upward. It was also looking inward, into storerooms, family lines, debts, sickness, and dreams. As the stars weaken, you sense that everyone behind these walls belongs to a web of obligations, and a brewer owes beer, a farmer owes grain, a priest owes ritual correctness, a child owes silence. Though children have historically treated that duty with limited enthusiasm, a king owes protection, the gods owe order, perhaps, but no human can force them to pay on time. The sky begins to pale with such slowness that it feels uncertain. Not light yet, only the idea of light. The high edges of mudbrick walls soften from black to grey. The temple platform grows larger as the darkness loosens around it. A rooster may call from some hidden courtyard, but even that sound does not end the tension. It only announces that the waiting has become measurable. You stand among closed doors and sleeping roofs, and the city seems to reveal its secret. Sumerian fear before sunrise did not belong only to superstition, it belonged to urban life itself. So many lives pressed together, so many fragile walls, so many stored hopes, so many unseen dependencies. In the final hour, the city was a body and every doorway was a nerve. The dawn has not arrived. The city listens through its bricks. In your ears, the echo changes into ritual sound, quiet enough to belong to darkness. A footstep crosses baked brick. A vessel touches stone. Somewhere inside the temple precinct, a servant lifts an oil lamp and shields its small flame with one careful hand. The final hour before sunrise is not empty here. It is being watched, measured, and handled, like a nervous animal that might bite if ignored. You enter a courtyard still blue with night. The floor is swept. though dust already waits nearby with professional patience. Clay basins stand close to a wall. A jar of water rests in shadow. The scent of oil is thick, mixed with ash, wool, damp plaster, and a sweetness left by incense burned earlier in the night. Nothing is hurried. The priests and attendants move as though haste would offend the unseen. The temple is awake before the city fully wakes. That matters in Sumerian thought. The divine household requires care, and care begins before ordinary daylight. Food must be prepared, vessels must be clean, hand must be washed, words must be spoken correctly, because a mistaken phrase in sacred space is not just embarrassing, it is the sort of thing people remember, especially if the harvest fails later. A mainstream historical fact rests beneath this scene. Mesopotamian temples functioned as houses for the gods, with cult statues clothed, fed, honoured, and approached through carefully organised ritual. Scholars at the University of Chicago and Yale have described how temple service combined worship, administration, labour, music, and social hierarchy. The sacred was not separate from daily management. It had schedules, stores, workers, and expectations. That is strangely intimate. A god has a breakfast. Of course, this does not mean the divine presence was imagined as helpless. It means human beings served the order that allowed heaven and earth to remain aligned. The temple meal was not casual hospitality. It was a reenactment of cosmic arrangement. In the hour before sunrise, when the world felt unverified, those tasks carried a heavier charge. You hear water poured into a bowl. The sound is small, but in the courtyard it becomes important. Water cleanses hands, vessels, thresholds, perhaps even the mood of the air. In a land where irrigation sustains life, water is never simple. It is practical, sacred, dangerous, and political all at once. Too little means hunger, too much means flood, properly guided. It makes fields shine green under a hard sky. The temple attendants understand measured things. They measure grain, oil, wool, time, and gesture. A wick must burn long enough. An offering must be sufficient. A chant must be remembered in sequence. The final hour is shaped by this discipline, because fear becomes less overwhelming when it has a task list. Humanity has always been good at that. Faced with cosmic uncertainty, someone finds a container and starts organising. A scribe may sit nearby, though perhaps not at this exact hour. His tablet is damp enough to receive signs. His stylus presses wedges into clay. He records goods, names, deliveries, or instructions with a seriousness that feels almost comic beside the immensity of the night. Yet the comedy is gentle. Without such records, the temple would lose track of its offerings, and apparently even divine households dislike missing inventory. There is an open scholarly debate over how much early Sumerian ritual was standardized across cities. Some researchers see shared patterns among temple economies and divine service. Others emphasize strong local traditions, particular city gods, and rituals that have changed over time. The surviving evidence is uneven, and many practices were probably performed without ever being written down. What is preserved is a shoreline, not the whole sea. Still, you can sense a pattern. Before daylight returns, people inside the temple prepare the world to receive it. They do not create the sun, but they help maintain the relationship between human order and divine order. They stand in the fragile space where neglect might feel dangerous. If the god is not honoured, if purity is not restored, if words fail, then what else might fail? The silence listens back. A priest raises his hand. Perhaps he murmurs a formula known to those trained for serving. Perhaps he checks an offering table. Perhaps he examines ashes, oil, or the condition of a flame. Sumerian and later Mesopotamian traditions gave deep attention to signs, and the boundary between ritual observation and omen interpretation could be very thin. A strange sound, an animal's movement, a dream before waking, the flicker of a lamp, all might seem capable of meaning something. Meaning can be exhausting. The temple workers live inside a world crowded with intention. A cracked vessel is not always just a cracked vessel. A bird call may not be just a bird call. A flame that bends without wind invites thought, and thought invites unease. In the final dark hour, the human mind searches for messages because uncertainty leaves too much empty space. A fringed tidbit slips into the lamplight. Some modern writers imagine Sumerian priests as keepers of a secret astronomical science inherited from impossibly ancient masters. The sober evidence is less dramatic, though still remarkable. Mesopotamian scholars eventually became careful observers of celestial cycles, but the earliest temple world was also full of ritual, labour, music, offering, and local devotion. No lost machine is needed. The real achievement is already strange enough. The temple has sounds of its own, the brush of linen, the scrape of a low stool, the creak of a basket, a whispered correction from one attendant to another. Because sacred service does not prevent workplace irritation. Someone has placed a vessel in the wrong position. Someone else has noticed. Civilization advances. The air grows cooler for a moment just before the horizon changes. This is the small cold breath that sometimes comes before dawn, and it seems to move through the courtyard like a visitor. The lamp flame leans, the smoke lifts in a narrow thread. You feel the skin of your arms respond before your mind decides what it means. In such a moment, the fear of the final hour is not loud, it is disciplined. It wears clean garments. It washes its hands. It counts jars and speaks old words. This fear belongs to people who believe the world must be maintained, not merely inhabited. The sun may return every morning at all, but certainty is not granted freely. It is courted through practice. The temple attendants do not know themselves as characters in some ancient story. They are tired people doing necessary work. One may be hungry and another may be thinking about a sick child. Another may privately dislike the superior who corrects his posture. Yet their movements become part of a greater pattern, and the pattern gives the hour a shape. Oil feeds flame. Water touches skin. Incense changes air. Words move from mouth into darkness. A council decree from later Mesopotamian cities can prove how carefully institutions guarded temple property and ritual responsibilities, though the emotional experience behind those rules remains harder to recover. Modern scholars continue to discuss whether religious fear was mainly cosmic, social, political, personal, or some inseparable mixture of all four. The tablets do not answer with one voice, they murmur from many rooms. You remain beside the courtyard wall. The western sky lightens by a shade so slight it almost feels imagined. No one celebrates yet. The dangerous hour is not finished simply because darkness has weakened. The ritual must continue, the god must be honoured, the vessels must be set right, the world must be invited to become itself again. And in that careful waiting, you understand something quiet. The Sumerians feared the final hour before sunrise because they did not assume order was automatic. Order had to be served. It had to be cleaned, fed, counted, sung to, and guarded through the vulnerable edge of night. The lamp still burns. The water bowl treble. The silence has not released them. For a moment, it feels as though the clay itself begins to speak. Not loudly, of course. Clay is far too old for that kind of a behaviour. It speaks through marks, through wedges pressed by reeds, through signs that once belonged to working hands and watchful minds. In a scribal room, long before the sky is bright, tablets rest in baskets, on shelves, or beneath cloth, holding the anxieties of people who wanted the night to explain itself. The room smells of damp earth. Fresh clay has a living scent, cool and mineral like riverbank after water withdraws. A stylus lies near a tablet whose surface is not yet fully hardened. Its signs are sharp. A trained reader could follow them as easily as a path through reeds, though to your eyes they look like tiny footprints left by a bird with serious administrative responsibilities. The marks are orderly, but the fears inside them are not. Ancient Mesopotamian records contain many references to dreams, omens, strange births, unusual animal behavior, celestial signs, and ritual responses to danger. Scholars at institutions such as Yale and the University of Chicago have studied omen collections, showing how later Mesopotamian scribes organized uncertainty into vast systems. The roots of this habit reach deeply into older Sumerian traditions, where divine messages could appear in unexpected forms. A dream was not always dismissed as private nonsense. It could be a doorway. That is unsettling. A dream follows you home. In the final hour before sunrise, dreams are especially powerful because the sleeper has nearly returned, but not fully. The body lies warm beneath wool, the mouth is dry, the room is dark. A person wakes with an image still clinging to the mind, a flooded field, a dead relative, a strange animal, a god standing far away, a door that will not close. The dream feels more real because daylight has not yet weakened it. You stand beside a sleeping mat in a narrow room. The roof beams above are made of palm wood and reed. A clay jar sits near the wall. In one corner, a small figurine may have been placed for protection, though much depends on period, household, and custom. The darkness presses gently against the body. Someone stirs, opens their eyes, and tries to remember whether the dream came from the stomach, the gods, the dead, or something with worse manners. The Sumerians and their Mesopotamian successors did not treat every sign equally. Some required experts, some belonged to household interpretation, some were later collected into learned series with remarkable detail. A mainstream historical fact is clear. Omen literature became one of the most elaborate intellectual traditions of ancient Mesopotamia, especially in later Akkadian scholarship. Research in journals devoted to Near Eastern studies has shown how these texts linked events in the world with possible outcomes for king, city, field, or family. Yet scholars debate how these written omen collections relate to everyday practice. Were they records of popular belief refined by scribes, or scholarly systems mostly used by elites? Did ordinary workers know simplified versions, or did they rely on local specialists and family memory? The evidence does not allow a tidy answer. The tablet has preserved the learned surface of a much wider human worry. A tablet might describe what follows if a person dreams of water. Another might treat the appearance of a snake, a lion, a storm, a collapsing wall, or a strange light. Later texts became astonishingly specific, because anxiety loves categories. It does not merely ask whether something is bad, it asks whether it is bad for the king, bad for barley, bad for a journey, bad for childbirth, or bad for that one cousin who already seemed unlucky. The fringe tidbit is easy to find here, waiting like a beetle under a jar. Some modern occult traditions claim direct descent from Sumerian dream magic, presenting ancient tablets as manuals for hidden powers. Serious historians are cautious about that. The tablets are real, and that they do preserve ritual language and omen logic, but they belong to specific ancient cultures, not to a single secret school surviving unchanged into the present. Still, the appeal is understandable. A dream tablet feels like a key. In the darkness, keys matter. You imagine a scribe copying a line from an older source. He presses the stylus into clay with steady precision. He may not be frightened at that moment. He may be irritated, bored, proud, or simply trying to avoid mistakes. Yet the text he copies exists because someone, somewhere, feared that a sign without interpretation was more dangerous than a sign understood. To write an omen is to trap part of fear inside a pattern. It says the world may be strange, but it is not completely unreadable. The gods may speak in fragments, but fragments can be compared. The night may trouble the mind, but the tablet offers a trained response. That is the quiet brilliance of the scribal tradition. It does not remove dread, it gives dread a filing system. A reed curtain moves in the faint air. A person wakes suddenly, heart quick, from a dream of falling into a canal. For a few breaths. The room is neither this world nor the dream world. The sleeper looks toward the doorway. The clay floor feels cold beneath one foot. The household is silent, yet not empty. In the last hour before sunrise, silence has weight. Ancient texts often treat unusual sounds as meaningful. A creak, a cry, a call from an animal, a noise at the door. These could attract interpretation depending on setting and tradition. You can understand why. Before artificial light, before locked glass windows, before clocks glowing with patient blue numbers, a sound in darkness had no simple explanation. The ear reached where the eye could not go. Oh, a dog barks once outside, then it stops. That is almost... Oh, what? The sleeping person waits for another sound, and none comes. The mind supplies possibilities. A thief, a fox, a wandering spirit, a neighbour going to relieve himself with absolutely no concern for dramatic timing. The ancient world did not always separate the ordinary from the uncanny as sharply as modern people pretend to do. In the final hour, both enter through the same door. The tablet tradition turns this unstable experience into memory. Signs are gathered, repeated, taught, corrected, and passed forward. The clay becomes a second kind of dawn, not giving light, but offering recognition. Someone has feared this before, someone has named it, someone has pressed it into earth. You notice how humble the medium is. Clay is not rare, reeds are not glamorous, yet together they preserve the trembling thought of civilizations. A gold cup may be stolen, a palace may burn, a king may boast himself into dust, but a small tablet, buried by accident, can remain silent for thousands of years and then open like a dry seed. Records from Nippur, and other cities reveal the importance of scribal learning in Mesopotamian culture. Schools trained students through copying lists, signs, proverbs, hymns, and literary compositions. This education helped preserve not only practical administration, but also the stories of gods, kings, cities, and cosmic order. The scribal world made the invisible more durable. Still, the hour itself resists complete capture. No tablet gives you the whole feeling of waking before dawn with fear in your throat. No omen series can fully describe the way a room changes when a dream has just ended. The texts preserve categories, but the body preserves tremors, and perhaps that is why these records remain so haunting. They do not show a people lost in childish superstition. They show a people trying to read a universe that felt alive, layered, and morally responsive. They show intelligence meeting uncertainty without the comfort of modern distance. They show human beings doing what human beings still do, waking too early among themselves, remembering something strange, and wondering whether the day has already been marked. The eastern wall is turning grey. The tablet waits in shadow. The dream has not quite left the room. The eastern horizon remains sealed, and for a little while the world feels unfinished. You stand where the city gives way to open ground, where low fields stretch toward the dim line of river and sky. Nothing shines yet. The canal is only a darker band in the dark earth. Date palms stand stiff and black, their crowns lifted like hands that have forgotten whether they are praying or warning. The sun is still hidden. That absence is not a small thing. In the Sumerian world, the returning light carries more than warmth. It brings visibility, judgment, direction, and the ordinary courage people need for labour. Without it, paths blur, faces vanish, a person becomes a voice, a shape, a suspicion. The final hour before sunrise therefore holds a peculiar pressure, because the great witness has not yet taken his place above the land. You feel the ground cool beneath your feet. Fine dust clings to your sandals, somewhere beyond the fields. Frogs sound from wet places, and the reeds answer with a dry whisper. A bird gives one uncertain call, then falls quiet, as though it has spoken too soon. Even the animals seem to wait for permission. In Sumerian tradition, the sun god Utu is associated with light, justice, and the ability to see what is concealed. Later Akkadian tradition knows a related solar figure as a judge of heaven and earth. Records from hymns, prayers, and seals confirm that solar divinity was linked to truth and legal order in Mesopotamian thought. Scholars at major universities have long noted that this connection between sunlight and justice is one of the clearest symbolic patterns in the ancient Near East. It makes sense, does it not? Light finds things. A stolen measure of grain, a false boundary stone, a footprint near a door, a bruise beneath a sleeve, a broken reed mat, a face evading another face. Dawn does not solve every wrong, because history would be much shorter and far less annoying if it did, but daylight gives wrongs a surface, and it makes concealment harder. It restores the possibility of being seen. So the missing sunspot becomes a silence in the court of the universe. The judge is travelling somewhere you cannot follow. The seat is empty. The witnesses wait. The accused, which might include every human being on a difficult morning, remain in the half-dark with their thoughts. Ancient people did not imagine the sun merely as a lamp hung over the world. The sun moved, vanished, and returned through realms charged with divine meaning. Its path suggested order, but also peril. Each morning proved that the ordered cycle had survived another passage through darkness. That is a comforting thought only after the light appears. Before it appears, the comfort has not yet been delivered. You look east again. Nothing. Not true nothing. Perhaps. The blackness has softened. The edge of the land is faintly less absolute. But the disk itself has not risen, and that missing circle matters in the imagination. Absence can become a being of its own. What is not present begins to feel active. The sun is not simply away, it is delayed, withheld, endangered, or judging from behind a curtain. Here a scholarly debate opens like a narrow gate. Researchers continue to discuss how ordinary Mesopotamians understood divine justice in daily life. Some evidence suggests formal legal procedures, oaths, and royal inscriptions drew authority from the gods. Other evidence shows that illness, dreams, omens, and misfortune could also be interpreted through divine displeasure or unseen imbalance. The relationship between law, fate, and personal piety remains complex, and no single tablet settles it. The sun god's connection to justice appears in formal texts, but what did that mean for a tired farmer, a brewer, a widow, or a child afraid of a shadow? Perhaps it meant that someone beyond the household saw what powerful neighbours ignored. Perhaps it meant hidden guilt would not remain hidden forever. Perhaps it meant that the morning itself was a kind of inspection. That can comfort. That can frighten. Justice is gentle only when you believe yourself innocent, and even then the innocent have reasons to worry. In a world of gods, demons, ancestors, vows, debts, and ritual obligations, innocence is rarely simple. Did you forget an offering? Did you speak carelessly near a shrine? Did you step across something forbidden without knowing? Did your family inherit a displeasure too old to name? The human mind can turn even sunlight into an auditor. A quirky fringe tidbit comes drifting across the field. Some modern star theory enthusiasts have claimed that Utu's solar journey encodes advanced astronomical knowledge from a vanished science. Serious historians do not need that claim. The Sumerians and their successors certainly watched the sky with intelligence, and later Mesopotamian astronomy became extraordinarily sophisticated. Yet the early fear of sunrise belongs first to lived rhythm, religious imagination, farming, labour, and the daily drama of light returning to a flat land. No secret engine is required. The horizon is strange enough. You can imagine a worker waiting near the canal, tools at his side. He cannot begin properly until light shows the water level, the state of the banks, the marks in the field, the condition of the seedlings. Darkness hides practical information. A broken embankment could ruin a plot. A pest infestation could spread. A neighbour might have shifted a boundary, because human beings achieved pettiness long before polished iron. When dawn comes, the world becomes legible again. The same is true in the city courts. A dispute needs witnesses, a contract needs names, a debt needs confirmation, A boundary needs inspection. Law depends on seeing, remembering, and speaking before others. The solar god's link to justice grows from that simple human truth, then rises into theology. Light allows society to function, so light becomes sacred order, yet the final hour asks a disturbing question. What happens while order is not yet visible? The Sumerians lived in a landscape where dawn could be beautiful, but also severe. Giosn. Once the sun rose, heat would follow, labour would begin, officials would count, masters would call, animals would need feeding, bricks would dry, fields would demand attention. The return of the sun was not merely poetic blessing, it was also the return of obligation. Perhaps that is part of the fear. Darkness is dangerous, but daylight does not always rescue you into rest. It rescues you into responsibility. The first light touches the higher surfaces before it reaches the street. Temple edges, palm crowns, roof lines, the tops of walls, all receive it earlier than the ground. This uneven arrival matters to the eye. It makes the world seem judged in layers. The high things are revealed, the low things remain waiting. You stand in the dim lower world and watch brightness choose its first witnesses. A hymn might praise the rising sun as one who opens the day and exposes hidden things. A legal oath might call divine powers to watch over truth. A seal might show a figure brought before a radiant god. Each form gives you a fragment of the same idea. The sun is not passive. The sun enters. You sense why the last hour can feel tense. The feared moment is not simply before light. It is before exposure. It is before the world discovers what survived the night and what did not. It is before dreams fade. Doors open, losses are counted, and faces become readable. It is the final privacy of darkness, and privacy can shelter both the innocent and the guilty. The eastern rim begins to glow. Still no disk, only a widening pallor. Grey becoming silver, silver warming toward faint gold. The reeds are clearer now, and the canal shows a skin of reflected sky. A line of birds lifts from the marsh in uneven motion, as if thrown gently upward by an unseen hand. Soon the judge will appear. Soon every wall will have an edge. Soon every hidden thing will decide whether to remain hidden. And for this last breath of darkness, the world waits with its eyes lowered. The cold iron latch does not belong to Sumer, but your hand almost expects to feel one. Instead, there is wood, reed, cord, clay, and the polished wear of many fingers. The doorway before you is simple, yet the space around it feels charged. Inside, a household sleeps beneath woven covers. Outside, the street still holds the last darkness. Between them lies the threshold, thin as a breath and old as fear. This is where borders matter. The Sumerians and their Mesopotamian successors imagined the world as crowded with powers that did not always stay in their proper places. Some were great gods with temples and songs. Others were lesser spirits, demons, wandering forces, and hostile presences that could approach the vulnerable body, the lonely road, the sick bed, or the doorway. The final hour before sunrise made those borders feel especially weak, because night was ending, yet day had not claimed the earth. You stand beside a doorway and listen. A reed screen stirs. The movement is tiny, but the mind gives it intention. That is the old human problem. A strip of woven reed can become a warning if seen at the wrong hour. A shadow near the wall can seem crouched. A sleeping child's uneven breath can fill a mother with dread. The unseen world does not need to appear clearly. It thrives on almost. Mesopotamian texts preserve names and descriptions for many dangerous beings, including figures associated with illness, wilderness, childbirth danger, nightmares, and attacks upon the sleeping. Scholars at universities diverse such as Chicago, Oxford, and Yale have studied incantation texts that show how deeply ritual protection shaped ancient life. These sources confirm that fear of hostile supernatural forces was not random. It was organised through names, roles, symptoms, and countermeasures. A named fear is not gone. It is only a dress. In the dim street, you feel how useful a name can be. Without a name, danger is everywhere. With a name, it can be spoken to, warned away, trapped in a formula, or handed over to a specialist who claims to know its habits. That specialist might be an incantation priest, healer, temple worker, or learned practitioner trained in the long patience of ritual words. The demon becomes an opponent with rules, which is better than mist with teeth. A fringed tidbit waits near the doorway, naturally, because fringed tidbits enjoy thresholds too. Some modern writers imagine Mesopotamian demons as memories of real predatory animals, misunderstood diseases, or even encounters with non-human intelligences. Serious scholarship is more cautious: illness, animal danger, social anxiety, sleep paralysis, and religious imagination may all have contributed to these beings. A demon can be many fears wearing one name. The night makes that believable. You step into a narrow room, the floor is cool, a sleeping mat lies near the wall. Beside it rests a small object, perhaps an amulet, perhaps a figurine, perhaps only a household thing given extra meaning by anxious eyes. Protective objects are known from many Mesopotamian contexts, especially in later periods, where figures could be placed near doors, beds, and foundations. Their purpose was not decoration in the modern sense. They stood guard. There is scholarly debate over how far specific protective practices can be traced into the earlier Sumerian phases, because later Akkadian and Assyrian materials are often more abundant and explicit. Some researchers emphasize continuity in Mesopotamian concern with demons and ritual defense. Others warn against reading later systems too neatly back into earlier centuries. The evidence is layered, and layers are beautiful, but they can also be treacherous underfoot. Still, the basic fear is deeply ancient. Doorways invite danger because they are openings. Beds invite danger because the sleeper cannot defend himself. Infants invite danger because life there is new, small, and terribly uncertain. Lonely streets invite danger because no witness stands nearby. The hour before sunrise gathers all these risks and folds them into one soft black cloth. You hear a whisper from within the house. Someone has woken, perhaps from a dream, perhaps from the feeling of being watched. The person does not rise immediately. Instead, they listen. Their breath becomes careful. The body knows fear before the mind tells a story. A tightening chest, a dry tongue, a hand reaching toward a charm. These are older than language. A famous group of Mesopotamian protective traditions dealt with terrifying female and malevolent beings associated with harm to mothers and infants, though details change across time and language. Archaeological and textual studies from major research institutions show that rituals often combined spoken formulas, symbolic objects, purification, and appeals to stronger divine powers. The pattern is clear. A threatening presence is named, contained, and driven away by order, or as tools. Water, clay, flour, wool, oil, salt, reeds, and spoken words can all become defensive materials in ritual thought. These are ordinary things turned serious. The same world that feeds a family can also protect it. A bowl becomes more than a bowl. A line of powder becomes a boundary. A figurine buried beneath a floor becomes a silent guard who never asks for better working conditions, which is admirable, though perhaps not cheerful. The demon near the threshold is rarely just one thing. It may represent sickness entering a house. It may represent the wild outside the city. It may represent the fear of strangers, the dread of childbirth, the helplessness of sleep, or the memory of a death that came in the night. Ancient people did not require these meanings to be separate. Their world allowed a danger to be medical, spiritual, social, and symbolic at once. The final hour sharpens this complexity during deep night. People may sleep too heavily to think. At full dawn, work begins and fear is distracted by tasks. But in the last hour, the mind wakes while darkness remains. That is a dangerous arrangement. It gives imagination time to furnish the room. You can almost see a figure at the doorway, though it is only a folded mat. You can almost hear a step, though it is only the settling of a mudbrick. You can almost feel breath at the back of your neck, though the air is moving from a gap in the wall. Almost is enough. The ancient imagination lives there, and so does the modern one. Perhaps this is why incantations matter. They give the mouth something to do when the eyes cannot decide. A phrase repeated softly can steady the pulse. A divine name can feel like a lamp. A ritual action can return control to trembling hands. Whether one studies these practices as religion, medicine, psychology, social order, or poetry, their human wisdom remains visible. Her fear needs response. Outside her, the eastern sky is beginning to loosen. Shadows no longer merge completely. A jar is a jar again. The doorway is only a doorway. Mostly, the reed screen is not a waiting hand, but the sense of danger does not disappear all at once. It withdraws reluctantly, like something offended by dismissal. A household member rises and touches the door. The wood is cool, the bar is still in place, no thief has entered, no visible harm stands in the room, yet the small protective object remains where it was placed, because the next night will come, the next illness may come, the next dream may come. One dawn does not cancel the need for guardians. You stand at the threshold as the first thin light enters the street. It lies across the floor in a pale strip, crossing the border between outside and inside. For a moment, the light itself becomes the strongest charm. It reveals corners, it quiets the almost, it makes the room ordinary again, but not completely. Because anyone who has woken too early knows the truth the Sumerians knew well. Some fears prefer borders, some fears wait at doors, some fears lean close when the world is neither night nor day, and the threshold remembers every footstep. Your attention settles on the sleeping body, the most ordinary mystery in the room. A person lies wrapped in wool or linen, breathing softly, face turned toward the wall. Nothing dramatic happens. No temple door opens. No god descends in visible brightness. Yet the body itself feels strangely abandoned, as though the person has travelled somewhere without rising from the mat. Sleep is a small disappearance. The Sumerians knew, as all ancient people knew, that sleep changes a human being. Speech stops, the eyes close, the limbs grow heavy. A strong man becomes still as a child. A careful woman, alert through the day, drifts beyond the reach of household noise. A king, with guards and seals and orders, becomes a warm shape and beneath fabric. Sleep does not respect status as much as status would prefer. In Mesopotamian thought, human life was not imagined as a simple machine of flesh, breath, name, shadow, personal god, fate, dream, and bodily strength all belonged to the wider pattern of existence. The exact terms changed across languages and centuries, but the general idea remained rich and layered. Modern scholars at Yale and the University of Chicago have shown that Mesopotamian texts often connect illness, dreams, divine anger, and ritual impurity with the condition of the person as a whole. The body was never only body, it was a meeting place. You kneel near the sleeper and hear the slight rasp of breath. Breath is intimate because it proves life without argument, yet it is also fragile. It comes and goes through openings that cannot be closed for long. A body that breathes is always receiving the outside world. Air enters from darkness, from dust, from damp courtyards, from rooms where someone has burned oil, cooked barley, or whispered a charm. The border of the person is porous. That porosity mattered. Illness could enter. A demon could press close. A dream could arrive without invitation. A god could send a warning. A dead relative might appear in the mind's night landscape. carrying a message nobody wanted before breakfast. When a sleeper woke in the last dark hour, the return to the body might feel incomplete, as though some part of the self had not yet found its proper place. A mainstream historical fact stands quietly behind this unease. Ancient Mesopotamian medicine joined practical treatment with ritual diagnosis, using herbs, bandages, observation, incantations, and appeals to divine powers. Research in major academic publications has long emphasized that healers did not separate physical and supernatural causes in the way modern medicine often does. Pain could be treated with plants, but also interpreted through signs, sins, curses, or hostile forces. This was not ignorance dressed up in robes. It was a different map. On that map, the sleeping body sits at a dangerous crossing. It cannot watch the door. It cannot answer accusation. It cannot control its dreams. It cannot notice a scorpion near the bedding, a fever rising in the blood, or the trembling of an infant nearby. The person is alive, but temporarily removed from command. The household must guard what the sleeper cannot guard. You notice the bed itself, if bed is even the right word. Many slept on mats, low platforms, reed bedding, or folded textiles. Depending on wealth and setting, the surface is close to the ground. That closeness has a mood: dust, insects, cool clay, and the smell of old walls surround the sleeper. The floor is not an abstract foundation. It is the skin of the house, and beneath it may lie buried objects, ancestors, offerings, or memories of construction. A quirky fringed tidbit appears here with unusual confidence. Some modern interpreters suggest that ancient accounts of night demons may describe sleep paralysis, that terrifying condition in which a waking person feels unable to move while sensing a presence nearby. It is only one possible comparison, and it cannot explain every Mesopotamian demon story. Still, it helps modern listeners understand why night fear often gathers around the chest, the breath, and the bed. Imagine waking and being unable to rise. The room watches you. A shape stands near the doorway, or perhaps the brain invents one from darkness. Your body remains heavy. Your voice refuses to form. The fear feels external because the helplessness feels too powerful to belong only to you. In such a moment, a demon is not a silly idea. It is an accurate emotional description of being trapped inside your own flesh. Scholars continue to debate how ancient Mesopotamians understood the relationship between dreams and the self. Some texts treat dreams as messages sent by gods or spirits. Others imply that dreams may arise from personal condition, ritual impurity, or contact with forces beyond normal perception. The surviving evidence does not reduce neatly to one theory. The ancient sleeper may have been messenger, victim, witness, and traveller all at once. You sit in the dimness and consider the person's name. In Mesopotamian culture, the name was not merely a label. Names carried identity, family connection, divine reference, and social memory. To be named was to be placed within the world. To be forgotten was to fade. This belief appears strongly in funerary concerns, royal inscriptions, and prayers that ask future people to speak a name again. A sleeping person does not speak their own name. Others must remember it. That thought is small and sad. It also explains why households matter. To sleep among kin is to place your undefended body inside a circle of recognition. Someone knows who you are. Someone can wake you, feed you, mourn you, protect you, or complain that you snore like a goat with legal authority. The joke is gentle, because the fear is real. In a society where medical dangers were many and survival could be uncertain, the difference between sleep and death could feel very thin from the outside. A person lies still. Breath grows faint, the skin cools, a family waits. Ancient people knew this border intimately, because death entered homes more often than modern comfort likes to admit. The final hour before sunrise intensifies that resemblance. The body is still in darkness, but the day is close. A sick person may worsen near morning, A fever may break, a dreamer may wake crying, a child may finally sleep after a long night, and the exhausted mother may fear the silence more than the crying. The hour becomes a test of whether breath continues into light. You hear a woman's hand brush fabric. She leans close to someone sleeping and listens. It may be a child, it may be an elder, it may be a husband whose breath has become too soft. The room smells of wool, skin, clay, and yesterday's smoke. Her own breathing pauses while she waits for the next breath. When it comes, the world resumes. A tiny mercy. Ancient ritual responses often focused on restoring proper boundaries. Washing, fumigation, spoken formulas, amulets, offerings, and gestures could help place the person back inside order. The point was not always to cure in a narrow sense. It was to return the vulnerable body to a protected pattern, to reweave the torn edge between person, household, god, and world. As the sky pales, the sleeper shifts, the movement is simple, yet it carries relief. The body has returned to itself, the hand opens, the eyes blink, a dream dissolves, leaving only a taste of fear and perhaps one image that refuses to leave. Soon there will be food, work, complaints, heat, and noise. Soon the body will belong to the day again. But for a few more breaths, you witness the ancient truth. Humanity is powerful enough to build cities, canals, temples, laws, and tablets, yet helpless each night beneath a woven cover. The Sumerians feared the hour before sunrise because the sleeping body was still unfinished in its return. It waited between absence and waking, between breath and silence, between a dream's command and daylight's correction. The person opens their eye. The darkness lets go slowly. A scent of warm milk and old-school smoke hangs close to the sleeping room. The final hour before sunrise gathers around the smallest bodies first, because everyone in the household knows where life is most fragile. A newborn sleeps in a basket, or against the curve of a mother's arm, wrapped in cloth that has been touched too many times by anxious hands. Nearby, a woman sits awake, her back against the wall, listening with the entire surface of her skin. The baby breathes. Everyone depends on that. In ancient Sumer, as in every early society, birth was both ordinary and dangerous. Women bore children without modern medicine, without antibiotics, without clean surgical rooms, and without the quiet arrogance of machines that beep reassuringly beside the bed. Life arrived through pain, blood, heat, exhaustion, prayer, and the hands of other women. The household could rejoice, but joy did not erase dread. It only sat beside it, wide-eyed and tired. Archaeological and textual evidence from Mesopotamia confirms that childbirth, infancy, and household protection were major concerns across the ancient Near East. Scholars at leading universities have studied amulets, incantations, and later ritual texts directed against dangers to mothers and infants. These materials show that domestic fear was not a minor footnote to temple religion. It lived at the centre of family life, close to bedding, doorways, milk, and breath. You look toward the mother's face. She is not a symbol. She is tired. Her hair is damp near the temples. Her wrists ache. She has heard advice from older women, ritual specialists, relatives, and probably one deeply confident neighbour whose certainty exceeds her usefulness. Around her, protective habits gather. A knot tied in cord, a small object near the sleeping place, a whispered phrase, a bowl of water, a hand placed deftly over the child's chest. Tiny protections matter. They matter because the danger is not abstract. Infant mortality was high in the ancient world, though exact rates are difficult to calculate for Sumer specifically. Human remains, comparative historical studies, and ancient texts together suggest that infancy was a perilous passage. Many children did not live long enough to become visible in official records. Their absence is one of history's quietest wounds. The final hour before sunrise could feel especially frightening because exhaustion is strongest then. The mother has spent the night feeding, soothing, listening, and trying not to fall into sleep too deeply. The child's breathing changes. A cough comes, then stops. A small limb twitches. The darkness makes every movement meaningful and every silence too large. You understand how fear can become a presence in the room. Mesopotamian tradition preserved terrifying figures associated with threats to mothers and infants. Later texts speak more clearly of such dangers, and scholars debate how directly those later descriptions reflect older Sumerian beliefs. Some argue for long continuity and protective concerns across the region. Others warn that names, rituals, and demonologies changed across time, language, and place. The careful answer is that the fear is continuous, while the forms around it remain historically layered. That debate matters because it prevents the past from becoming a single painted backdrop. A woman in early Ur, a mother in later Babylon, and a family in an Assyrian city did not all live the same religious life. Yet they shared a human vulnerability that requires no translation. When an infant's breath is uncertain in darkness, theology becomes immediate. A quirky fringe tidbit appears softly here, wrapped in the same cloth as worry. Some modern writers claim that protective charms for babies preserve memories of a prehistoric mother goddess cult hidden beneath later Mesopotamian religion. Mainstream scholars treat that idea cautiously because evidence for a single ancient mother cult is far too neat for such a complicated world. Still, the repeated focus on birth, milk, fertility, and protection shows that family survival shaped religious imagination powerfully. No mystery is needed to explain that a child is enough. You notice the objects around the room: a jar, a woven basket, a spindle, a small container of oil, folded cloth, perhaps a bead or pendant. Each item belongs to daily work, but daily work in a household is never merely practical. Spinning thread, grinding grain, nursing a child, preparing food, washing cloth, and keeping insects away all become acts of defence. The house survives because women perform 1,000 small labours that inscriptions rarely praise. Ancient records often show men in public roles as kings, officials, as scribes, and named donors, but household life depended intensely on women's labour. Legal and administrative texts from Mesopotamia confirm that women could own property, work in temples, engage in economic activity, and appear in contracts. Although rights and roles varied by time and status, the mainstream picture is complex, not simple confinement and not modern equality. It is a world of duties, constraints, skills, and negotiated power. Inside this room, power looks like staying awake. It looks like listening. The mother knows the house by sound. You knew she can identify the creak of a roof beam, the scratch of a mouse, the shift of an older child, the water jar cooling in the corner. But the last dark hour brings sounds she cannot place. A faint scrape near the threshold, a bird calling too early, a neighbour's baby crying, then stopping. The silence after that cry crosses walls more easily than smoke. Perhaps she mutters a protective line taught by her mother. Perhaps she touches an amulet. Perhaps she promises an offering if the child lives through the fever. Such gestures do not belong to ignorance. They belong to responsibility under uncertainty. When knowledge is limited and love is enormous, every possible protection becomes reasonable. You feel the weight of the unseen women who stand behind her. Midwives, mothers, sisters, grandmothers, temple women, servants, healers, mourners. Their hands hold the story together. Their voices carry remedies, warnings, jokes, and rules that no royal inscription bothered to preserve. One says to keep the doorway watched. Another says not to speak a dangerous name. Another says the baby's cry is strong, and strong crying is better than quiet weakness. A fourth says something unhelpful, because history is realistic. The mother may roll her eyes. Softly, of course, the room begins to lighten, but the mother does not relax immediately. Dawn does not guarantee safety. It simply reveals the child's colour, the damp cloth, the mother's tired face, the state of the fire, the bowl that needs washing. The older child who has kicked off his covering again. Morning turns fear into tasks. It gives the household a list. And tasks are mercy. A family member opens the read screen a little. Pale air enters. The baby stirs, mouth seeking milk, hands opening and closing like tiny questions. The mother shifts the child toward her breast. Relief passes through the room, but it is not dramatic. It is a low warmth, like embers coaxed back into usefulness. Somewhere in the city, another house is not as fortunate. The Sumerians knew that too. Their protection did not always work. Their prayers did not always receive the answer they wanted. Their charms did not make them foolish, and failure did not make the fear imaginary. It made the fear honest. You remain near the wall as the first light touches the sleeping basket. The child's face appears, not as an idea, but as a fragile fact. The last darkness retreats from the room, leaving behind smoke, cloth, milk, and the tired love of those who watched. This was one reason the final hour before sunrise was feared. It was the hour when the household counted its living before the world became busy. It was when mothers listened for breath. It was when charms waited beside beds, and ancient hands held new life against the dark. The baby breathes again. The room receives the morning. A palace wakes differently from a house. The darkness is the same, but the silence has more servants inside it. You stand near a courtyard where guards hold spears and try to look carved from stone. Their eyes betray them. No one enjoys the final hour before sunrise. Not even men whose job is to pretend that fear is a private hobby of other people. The air tastes metallic. Bronze fittings, damp brick, lamp smoke, and leather mingle in the cold before dawn. Somewhere beyond an inner wall, a horse stamps, or perhaps a donkey complains with diplomatic restraint. A messenger waits with dust still clinging to his cloak. A scribe has been summoned too early, which no doubt confirms his darkest opinions about royal service. The king has not yet appeared, but his anxiety has arrived on time. In Sumer, kingship was never merely political. Royal authority depended on divine favour, public order, military strength, irrigation, temple relations, and the difficult art of convincing people that one man's command stood near the will of the gods. Early dynastic inscriptions from southern Mesopotamia show rulers dedicating objects to deities, building temples, digging canals, and presenting themselves as chosen or supported by divine powers. Scholars at universities such as Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have long emphasized the sacred dimension of Mesopotamian kingship. A king ruled people. He also answered upward. That upward pressure made dawn ominous. The final hour before sunrise could hold decisions that belong not only to households, but to cities and armies. A campaign might begin at first light, a treaty might be sworn, a canal inspection might determine whether fields survive the season, a prisoner might be judged, a royal dream might trouble the court. The king's private sleep could become public danger if interpreted as a message from the gods. You step into a chamber lit by the low lamps. The walls are plain compared with later imperial palaces, yet the space carries authority. A stool, a woven mat, a table for tablets, vessels of oil, perhaps weapons near a wall. The king may sit silent, wearing a garment whose folds hide his restlessness. Around him stand advisors, guards, priests, and scribes, each with a different kind of nervousness. Power does not remove fear. It gives fear staff. The court waits for signs. The sky matters, but so do dreams, sacrifices, animal behavior, and the condition of offerings. In later Mesopotamian tradition, rulers relied heavily on divination, especially through extispicy, the examination of animal entrails, and through celestial omens. Earlier Sumerian evidence is less systematized, yet divine signs and ritual consultation were already part of the political imagination. The ruler who ignored the gods risked more than embarrassment. He risked explaining disaster without a respectable excuse. A mainstream historical fact appears in the dim lamplight. The Sumerian king list presents kingship as having descended from heaven, placing royal authority within a cosmic framework rather than a purely human invention. Historians debate the list's historical value because it mixes memory, mythic structure, political ideology, and impossible reign lengths. Even so, the text reveals a crucial belief. Kingship was imagined as something bestowed, withdrawn, and transferred by by powers beyond human hands. That idea makes the final dark hour tremble. If kingship can descend, it can also depart. If a city holds divine favour, it can lose it. If the king's rule depends on cosmic approval, then the hidden sun becomes more than a delayed light. It becomes a withheld verdict. You hear a priest speak softly. He does not shout. Sacred advice is more frightening when delivered quietly. Perhaps the king has dreamed of a broken chariot, a flooded field, a lion entering the gate, or a star falling toward the city. Each image could be weighed. Each could be dismissed, feared, or softened by ritual response. The question is never simply what the dream was. The question is whom it concerns. Is it the king? Is it the army? Is it the city? In palace life, interpretation is power. A scribe who knows the tradition may shape a decision. A priest may recommend delay. A general may argue for immediate action because generals have rarely been famous for enjoying hesitation. An official concerned with grain might prefer peace, canals, and predictable taxation. The king must listen, choose, and appear decisive, even when the sky refuses to cooperate. There is an open scholarly debate about the balance between pragmatic politics and religious consultation in early Mesopotamian rule. Some historians stress material realities, such as irrigation control and labour mobilization, warfare, and trade. Others emphasize that sacred legitimacy was not ornamental, but central to how authority was imagined and obeyed. The strongest view may be that these forces cannot be separated cleanly. In Sumer, water, grain, gods, and kingship flow through the same channels. A fringed tidbit waits politely near the royal doorway. Some modern alternative histories claim the long reigns in ancient king lists prove that pre-human or superhuman rulers once governed Mesopotamia. Mainstream scholars read those enormous numbers differently, as mythic expressions of prestige, sacred time, literary pattern, or political memory. Yet the strangeness of the numbers still has power, and they make kingship feel older than ordinary history, stretching backward into a mist where human rulers almost become shadows of divine order. The king in the lamplit room may not be thinking about literary symbolism. He may be thinking about enemies. Sumerian cities-states often competed over land, water, trade routes, and prestige. Inscriptions from rulers such as Eannatum of Lagash reveal conflicts between neighbouring cities, and the famous Stele of the Vultures shows warfare presented through both human violence and divine sanction. The battlefield was not outside religion, it was wrapped in it. Before dawn, soldiers can move unseen, the gates can open, scouts can return, an enemy may be closer than rumour suggested. A campaign launched at sunrise begins in the decisions of darkness. The court's fear is therefore practical as well as cosmic. A wrong omen may delay victory. An ignored warning may invite defeat. A careless march may leave men dead in fields that will later grow barley as if nothing happened, which is a rude habit of fields. The palace courtyard grows paler. A guard shifts his weight. The sound of leather against skin seems too loud. The messenger at the edge of the room lowers his eyes. He carries information from a border, a canal, a temple, or a city that may no longer be loyal. Messages before dawn are rarely cheerful. Happy news usually waits until breakfast, because it has manners. The king rises. Everyone notices. This is the strange theatre of power. A man stands, and others read destiny into posture. Did he sleep well? Did the dream frighten him? Has the priest reassured him? Does he look chosen? Does he look abandoned? In a world where kingship descends from heaven, the body of the king becomes a public tablet, and everyone pretends not to read it while reading it intensely. A servant opens the way toward the outer court. The east is faintly silver. Soon the sun will appear, and the king may present himself to light, to soldiers, to officials, to gods, and to the waiting city. Until then, his authority remains wrapped in the same uncertainty as every sleeping child and every guarded door. He is higher than others, but not outside the hour. That may be the hidden lesson. The final hour before sunrise frightened Sumerian kings because it revealed the dependency beneath command. A king could order walls built, canals dug, troops gathered, and offerings prepared. He could not order the sun to hurry. He could not force a dream to mean victory. He could not guarantee that divine favour still rested on his name. The horizon brightens, the court holds its breath, and the ruler waits, like everyone else, to be seen by the returning light. Beyond the last houses, the land opens into fields that seem to breathe in the dark. You stand beside a canal bank where the mud is cold and faintly slick beneath your sandals. The city behind you is still a low shadow, but here the world is wider, flatter, and more exposed. The final hour before sunrise belongs to farmers, water workers, reed cutters, herders, and anyone whose day begins before comfort has made its Casey. The air smells green, not lush in the garden sense, but wet, earthy, and alive with canal weed, damp clay, animal dung, and crushed reeds. A thin mist lies close to the ground. Dew gathers on barley heads and on the leaves of small plants near the water's edge. Somewhere in the darkness, an ox snorts. A man mutters to it with the tired intimacy of someone who knows the animal's personality too well. Sumerian civilization depended on irrigation agriculture. The alluvial plain of southern Mesopotamia received little reliable rainfall, so canals, levees, ditches, and careful water management were essential for farming. Research from major universities and archaeological fieldwork has shown that grain production, especially barley, formed a foundation of urban life, temple economies, taxation, ration systems, and political authority. The fields were not separate from the city. They fed its gods, workers, rulers, and complaints. That is easy to forget. Mud feeds monuments. You walk along the canal and hear the slight slap of water against the bank in daylight. This channel may look ordinary, a practical cut in the earth. In the final darkness, it feels like a moving menagerie between survival and ruin. Water comes at the wrong time, seedlings drown. If it fails to come, a fields crack. If silt blocks the channel, labour must clear it. If a neighbour steals water, then the morning may become a legal problem with mud on its feet. The farmer rises early because heat will soon dominate everything. Work before sunrise is not romantic, it is efficient. The body can move before the sun becomes a punishment. Tools can be carried, animals yoked, banks inspected, and water directed while the air still has mercy. The final hour is feared, but it is also used. Ancient anxiety and practical scheduling walk side by side, like two tired brothers who pretend not to resemble each other. A mainstream historical fact emerges from the soil. Barley was especially important in southern Mesopotamia because it tolerated salinity better than many other crops. Over time, irrigation could contribute to salt buildup in the soil, reducing yields and shaping agricultural choices. Scholars have debated the scale and timing of salinization, but the broad environmental challenge is widely recognized. Sumerian farming was not simply generous riverland abundance. It was constant negotiation with water, salt, labour, and time. You kneel and touch the earth. It feels cool now, almost kind, yet within hours it will harden under heat. The farmer knows this transformation in his bones. He knows the smell of good mud, the texture of failing soil, the sound of water running too strongly, the look of pests on a crop. He may not write tablets, but the field has trained him with a strict curriculum. A fringe tidbit rustles in the barley. Some modern enthusiasts argue that Sumerian agricultural knowledge appeared suddenly because it was gifted by mysterious teachers from a vanished age. Archaeology tells a slower, more human story of long experimentation, settlement, plant management, irrigation, and regional exchange. Still, the sensation of sudden wonder is understandable when you see canals, cities, temples, writing, and fields working together. It can feel as if a hidden system has risen from mud overnight. But it did not rise overnight. It rose through aching backs. A group of workers appears as silhouettes near a ditch. One carries a hoe. Another leads an animal. Their garments are simple. Their movements practiced. The conversation is low, perhaps about water levels, perhaps about a sick relative, perhaps about a supervisor whose wisdom is not universally admired. Even in the ancient dawn, management had a reputation to maintain. The field before sunrise is full of skull threats. Insects may damage crops, birds may descend when light comes, rodents may disturb stores and edges, water may have broken through a bank in the night, footprints may show that animals entered where they should not. A farmer reads these signs the way a scribe reads clay, with less ceremony but equal seriousness. The earth is a tablet that rewrites itself constantly. There is an open scholarly debate about the relationship between irrigation demands and the rise of early political authority in Mesopotamia. Some researchers argue that large-scale water management encouraged centralized institutions and coordination. Others caution that local communities, households, and smaller networks also played major roles, and that irrigation did not mechanically create the state. The truth likely lies in a shifting balance. Canals require cooperation, but cooperation can be organized in many ways. In the dimness, cooperation feels less like theory and more like necessity. One man cannot maintain every channel. One household cannot control the river. A broken bank upstream can punish people downstream who did nothing wrong, which is basically the ancient version of the receiving someone else's problem with no invitation. The field teaches interdependence more sternly than any temple sermon. The final hour before sunrise is also a time for omens in the open air, a strange animal crossing a path, an unexpected cry from the marsh, an unusual wind, or a dream remembered while walking to the field may shape the mood of the day. The farmer's fear is not confined to demons in houses or kings in courts. It lives in the uncertain relationship between effort and result. You may do everything correctly, and still the crop may fail. That is a hard lesson. Nature is not fair. The Sumerian farmer knows the gods must be honoured, but he also knows mud must be moved. Piety does not clear a blocked canal by itself. A prayer may invite favour, yet a hoe must still enter the earth. This mixture gives Sumerian life its particular depth. The divine order is vast, but the human role is physical. You serve the gods with grain, and grain begins with sore muscles in wet fields. As the sky pales, the outlines of barley become visible. The heads bend slightly under dew. Date palms stand beyond the plots, their trunks dark and ribbed. A heron lifts from the canal and moves like a pale thought across the water. The workers pause to watch it, perhaps because beauty still interrupts labour, even when nobody has time to be poetic about it. The first light reveals damage near the bank. A small section has slumped into the water. It is not disaster, but it is work. One man sighs, another curses softly, not enough to offend heaven, just enough to maintain morale. They step into the mud and begin repairing what the night has loosened. This is why the final hour before sunrise could be feared in the fields. It was the hour when hidden damage waited to be discovered. It was the pause before water levels could be judged, before crops could be inspected, before hunger or safety took visible shape. In the darkness, every field was a question. At dawn, the answer began to appear. The sun has not yet climbed, but the land is no longer faceless. The canal shines faintly. The barley stirs. The workers bend to their task. Their shadows lengthen behind them, thin and blue on the damp ground. The city will eat because they work. The gods will receive offerings because they work. and the morning, indifferent but necessary, opens over mud, water, and human hands. The horizon holds a secret that no living person can reach by walking east. You stand on the plain and watch the last dark line of earth, imagining what lies beneath it, where the sun has been travelling while the city slept. To the eye, the sun disappears under the world. To the ancient mind, that disappearance is not a trick of distance. It is a journey through hidden country. The land below waits. In Sumerian imagination, the realm of the dead was not bright, gentle, or especially flattering to human pride. It was often pictured as a dusty, shadowed place, a house from which no one returns in ordinary fashion. The dead were not erased, but their existence was diminished, dry, and dependent on memory, offerings, and ritual care. The living world of bread, beer, sunlight, and speech stood above a quieter region of dust, gates, and names. A mainstream historical fact comes from ancient compositions such as the Descent of Inanna and other Mesopotamian texts concerning death and the netherworld. These works preserve a vision of the underworld as governed by powers, entered through gates, and bound by laws that even great beings must face. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied these texts as literature, religion, and social memory, not as simple maps, but as serious attempts to imagine the final boundary. You feel that boundary underfoot. The ground is firm, yet suddenly it seems thin. Beneath the packed earth may lie older floors, broken jars, bones, foundation deposits, abandoned walls, and the buried traces of people who also watched dawns come and go. In Mesopotamia, history rises by accumulating under your feet. A city becomes a mound because generations build on the remains of generations. The dead are not far away. They are below. That is a quiet thought, not comforting. Comforting. Exactly. You walk toward a burial place beyond the living rooms and storerooms. Practices varied across time, city, and status, but archaeology has found graves beneath house floors, in cemeteries, and in special burial contexts. At the famous royal cemetery revealed extraordinary burials with wealth, instruments, vehicles, attendants, and objects of power. Those discoveries, excavated by Leonard Woolley and studied by many later scholars, show both splendour and unease, because grandeur does not cancel death, it only dresses it very carefully. The final hour before sunrise draws the underworld closer because the sun has not yet escaped it. If the solar power travels beneath the horizon, then this hour is the last stage of that unseen passage. The light is still among the dead, or near them, or returning from their gates. You do not need a fixed doctrine to feel the poetry of that idea. Every dawn becomes a release. A fringed tidbit enters from the dust, wearing too much confidence and a mysterious cloak. Some modern alternative writers claim the Sumerian underworld preserves memory of actual underground cities, hidden chambers, or survivors of a prehistoric catastrophe. Archaeology has found impressive tombs, drains, foundations, and buried levels, but no evidence for a vast secret civilization beneath Sumer. Yet the image persists because Mesopotamian cities truly do sit upon layered human remains. The underworld is not fantasy when your ancestors are literally under the floor. The dead needed attention. Offerings to deceased family members, especially food and drink, appear in Mesopotamian traditions across long periods. The exact practices differed, and the evidence is uneven, but the principle is clear enough. Memory was active. Care for the dead helped maintain relationships across the most difficult border. A neglected dead person might become restless, resentful, or pitiable. Even death did not free families from responsibility, which feels very Mesopotamian. Nobody escapes administration, not even ghosts. You imagine a household at the final hour, where someone pours water or thinks of a name that should be spoken. The darkness makes the absent feel near. A father, a grandmother, a child, a lost brother. Each may return in dream, memory, or fear. The underworld is not only a place below the horizon, it is also the pressure of unfinished relationships. The dead remain in the world because the living keep needing them, missing them, fearing them, and asking whether they are at peace. There is an open scholarly debate about how sharply Mesopotamians separated ghosts, ancestors, underworld deities, and demons in everyday religious experience. Learned texts may distinguish categories. While ordinary fear may have blurred them, some spirits might be honoured family dead, others might be troubling wanderers, others might be signs of ritual failure or improper burial. The evidence suggests a varied landscape of belief, where social memory, grief, and cosmic geography overlap. In the final darkness, overlap feels natural. A dream of the dead before sunrise might be interpreted as a request, a warning, a complaint, or the mind's own sorrow rising when defences are low. A voice heard near a doorway might be wind, thief, spirit, or the echo of someone remembered too intensely. The Sumerian imagination did not treat the dead as completely silent. Silence itself could turn to be a form of speech. You stand beside a low grave or beneath a house where someone was buried long ago. The clay is cool. A vessel may have been placed with the body. A bead, a cup, a tool, a seal, or food remains may have accompanied the dead, depending on status and custom. These objects are humble and intimate. They suggest that death was a journey, a dwelling, or at least a condition requiring provision. People do not place cups beside nothing. The hour before dawn makes those provisions more poignant. Soon the living will eat, soon beer will be poured, bread broken, grain measures geared, animals fed. The dead do not join in the same way. They depend on what is given, remembered, or imagined. The returning sun separates the active from the shadowed again. Until it rises, the boundary feels less certain. A cold current moves across the plain. It carries the smell of dust, damp reeds, and distant smoke. You hear no voices now, only the low sound of water and the faint stirring of birds. The east is paling, but slowly. With the patience of something that has never cared about human impatience, beneath the horizon, the sun approaches the gate of return. Ancient texts about divine descent into the netherworld often emphasize rules that cannot be ignored. Even a goddess must pass through gates. Even power must surrender ornaments. Even beauty enters a place where rank changes meaning. That image is severe and unforgettable. It suggests that the underworld is not chaos, but another order, darker and stricter than the one above. The Sumerians may have feared the final hour before sunrise because it touched that order. The world of the dead was nearest then, not necessarily in distance, but in feeling. The hidden sun had not yet proved its escape. The names of ancestors might rise in the mind. The sleeping resembled the dead. The city stood on buried generations. The living waited above, while below, imagined gates remained closed. Then, at the edge of sight, the sky loosens. A thin brightness gathers where earth and heaven meet. The underworld does not vanish. It withdraws. The dead do not disappear. They return to their quieter rooms beneath memory and clay. The living receive another day, not because they have defeated death, but because light has crossed the border once more. You breathe in the grey air. The ground remains under your feet. The ancestors remain under the ground. The sun is almost here, carrying whatever it has seen beneath the worlds. And for one last moment, the horizon looks like a door. A low melody rises from the temple court, so quiet that it seems made from the last darkness itself. It is not a song for celebration. It is a song that bends its head. You stand where the air holds incense, ash, and the faint dampness of stone washed before dawn. Voices gather slowly, one joining another, until grief becomes organized enough to survive the morning. The sound is soft, It's also anciently heavy. Sumerian city laments are among the most haunting works preserved from Mesopotamia. They mourn destroyed cities, abandoned temples, broken walls, vanished people, and gods who seem to have turned away. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and other major research centres have studied laments such as those for Ur and Sumer as literary pearls, ritual, and historical compositions. They are not newspaper reports, but they carry memories of catastrophe through sacred language. You hear the singer's breath between lines. Their voices do not rush. They move like mourners crossing a courtyard with water gears held carefully in both hands. Each phrase seems to place one more broken brick back into an invisible wall. The city may still stand around you, yet the song remembers cities that fell. That is what makes it troubling. It brings ruin into a living morning. The hour before sunrise gives lament a special power. Darkness has not finished, and the day has not argued back. In that suspended time, a city can imagine its own destruction more clearly. The gates broken, the temple empty, the canals choked, the fields silent, the grinding stones unused, the streets without children, the gods departed from their houses, leaving only dust to receive the offerings. That thought chills the skin. A city can die. To modern ears, ancient laments may sound like poetry of loss, but to the people who performed them, they could also be ritual acts. Words shaped grief, but they also pleaded for restoration. A lament might recall divine anger, enemy attack, famine, abandonment, and the hope that a god or goddess would return. The singers did not merely describe suffering, they carried it into a form that heaven might hear. A mainstream historical fact rests at the centre of this sorrow. The city of Ur, once a major Sumerian royal and religious centre, declined after the fall of the third dynasty of Ur around the end of the third millennium before the Common Era. Later literary laments remembered such destruction through images of divine decree, storm, enemy violence, and sacred desolation. Archaeology and texts together show both political collapse and the powerful cultural memory built around it. You stand near a singer whose face is lit by a dying lamp. The flame turns the eyelids bronze. The mouth opens on words learned from older voices, perhaps copied by scribes, practiced by ritual specialists, repeated until memory and grief become the same road. The song does not need to invent fear, it only opens the storehouse where fear has been waiting. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through the smoke. Some modern seekers have claimed that Sumerian laments preserve echoes of a worldwide ancient disaster, perhaps a lost continent, a cosmic war, or a forgotten age of giants. Serious historians read them more carefully as responses to city destruction, political upheaval, theological crisis, and ritual memory. Yet the laments do feel larger than one event, because they speak from the place where every civilization secretly knows it can fall. That is their unsettling gift. They make ruin intimate. The singers describe abandonment with details that feel almost domestic. A temple no longer receiving food, streets no longer filled with voices, a mother bereft of children, a city like a woman left alone. These images do not require battle scenes to wound the listener. They show the aftermath, where ordinary life has been removed. The absence of bread can be more frightening than the clash of weapons. There is an open scholarly debate about how laments functioned in actual ritual performance. Some researchers emphasize their role in commemorating historical trauma and rebuilding civic identity. Others focus on their theological dimension, where catastrophe is understood through divine decision and possible reconciliation. Another view sees them as part of scribal education, preserved and copied by students who learned language through grief. Perhaps all these meanings remained alive together. The temple court grows paler, the voices continue. A drum may sound softly, or a stringed instrument may answer in a low pattern. The music is restrained, because mourning does not need to shout to be complete. You feel the sound in the ribs before the mind finishes understanding it. That is what ritual song can do. It gives the body a place to put fear. In the final hour before sunrise, lament becomes a rehearsal for loss and a plea against it. The city sings of ruin so that ruin may be held at a distance. It names abandonment so the gods might return. It remembers desolation so the present city does not become careless. Memory becomes a wall, not of brick, but of sound. You look toward the temple doorway. It is dark inside, and that darkness makes the song more urgent. If a god's house is empty, then the city's heart is empty. If the divine presence withdraws, then walls and soldiers mean little. Ancient Mesopotamian religion often imagined the welfare of the city as tied to the favour of its patron deity. When a city fell, its fall could be understood not only politically, but cosmically. That is a severe way to live. It is also strangely honest. Human communities still ask similar questions after disaster. Why this place? Why this day? Why were warnings missed? Who failed? What did we anger, neglect, or misunderstand? The ancient answer spoke of gods and decrees. The modern answer speaks of systems, climate, leaders, violers, and chance. The ache beneath the question has not changed very much. The singers lower their voices. One phrase is repeated with a slight change, like water returning to the same stone from a new angle. Repetition is not laziness here, it is dissent. The mind hears the idea again and again until it stops resisting. The city was full. The city emptied. The temple was bright. The temple darkened. The people called. The gods were far. Perhaps the last hour was feared because it allowed such memories to enter. In daytime, labour protects the mind from too much reflection. Someone must carry water, bake bread, count grain, mend a tool, soothe a child, answer an official, or argue about a missing goat with impressive seriousness. But before sunrise, memory has space. A city can hear its own fragility. The eastern sky begins to brighten behind the temple wall. The lamp is no longer the strongest light, yet it still burns stubbornly, a small official of hope refusing retirement. The singers do not stop at once. They let the song move toward the morning, carrying darkness with it rather than leaving it behind. Grief does not end because light improves the architecture. A final note trembles in the air, then silence receives it. You stand in that silence and feel how the lament has changed the hour. The fear before sunrise is no longer only fear of demons, dreams, sickness, or hidden damage. It is fear of history itself. Cities fall, gods withdraw, names vanish, streets become dust, yet voices keep singing at the edge of morning, asking the world not to forget what has been broken. The first light touches the court. It reveals the singers' faces, tired and calm. It reveals the swept floor, the vessels, the smoke thinning into grey air. It reveals that the city still stands for now. For now is a holy phrase, and the lament lets it breathe. A faint wind moves along the city wall, carrying dust, river dampness, and the smell of animals penned too close together. You stand above the gate, where the last stars hang over the plain like small lamps left burning by a careless sky. Below, the road disappears into darkness. It does not look like a road now. It looks like an invitation that has not explained itself. The guards are away, at least mostly awake. One leans on his spear with the wounded dignity of a man fighting sleep and losing negotiations. Another watches the flat land beyond the gate, his eyes moving between shadow, reed bed, and low track. The final hour before sunrise is cruel to watchers. The body wants rest, yet danger often prefers moments when attention thins. A gate is never just an entrance. It is the mouth of the city, and mouths must be guarded. Sumerian cities were built within contested landscapes of fields, canals, roads, and neighbouring powers. Archaeological evidence and early inscriptions show that city-states competed over territory, water, trade, and status. Scholars at major universities have long studied how walls as gates and military organisation shaped early urban life in southern Mesopotamia. A city wall was practical defence, public statement, and psychological boundary. It told outsiders that the people inside had something worth protecting. That is a dangerous announcement. Wealth attracts interest. From the wall, you can imagine the concerns below. Merchants may approach with donkeys loaded with wool, grain, metal goods, timber, stone, or luxury items brought through long exchange networks. Travellers may carry news from distant towns. Shepherds may return before heat rises. Messengers may arrive from another ruler. But darkness makes all arrivals uncertain. A merchant and a raider can both begin as a shape on the road. The guards listen for sound. Hooves, wheels, sandals, a cart axle complaining in the distance, a voice calling too late, an animal startled in the reeds. In daylight, the plain can be read by sight. Before dawn, it must be read by ear, and the ear is imaginative. It stretches into darkness and brings back possibilities, most of them unhelpful. A mainstream historical fact stands on the wall with you. The famous stele of the vultures from Lagash presents one of the earliest known visual records of organised warfare, showing soldiers in formation and divine sanction for battle. This monument reveals that conflict among Sumerian city-states was not occasional background noise. It was part of political memory, royal display, and sacred justification. War entered art, inscription, and the logic of rule. Yet everyday fear at the gate was smaller than royal monuments. It was the fear of being surprised. A wall is strong only if watched. A locked gate is useful only if someone remembers the bar. A guard who falls asleep can become the most important man in the city for all the wrong reasons, which is a very unfortunate career path. You touch the brickwork. It is rough beneath your fingers. Made from earth shaped into defence, mud brick walls could be massive, but they were also vulnerable to weather, neglect, undermining, work, and force. Maintenance mattered. Though the wall was not a permanent miracle, it was a labour agreement with gravity, rain, wind, and human whom a laziness all took an interest in its decline. There is an open, scholarly debate about the scale and character of warfare in early Sumer. Some historians emphasise frequent city-state conflict, military leadership, and boundary disputes. Others point out that trade, intermarriage, diplomacy, shared religious traditions, and economic interdependence also connected cities. The ancient plain was not only a battlefield, it was a network of rivalry and exchange, where today's enemy might also be tomorrow's trading partner, which must have made social gatherings awkward. A sound comes from the road. Everyone stills. It may be nothing more than a donkey shifting near the outer ditch, or a reed bundle slipping from a cart left by the roadside. The guard nearest you raises his head. Another turns toward the gate stairs. The darkness seems to thicken around the place where the sound came from. Nothing moves. Then a bird lifts suddenly from the marsh, and every man silently resents it. Birds have terrible timing. The fringe tidbit arrives with the bird, because superstition enjoys dramatic entrances. Some modern writers imagine Sumerian watchmen reading every animal movement as part of a secret military omen system inherited from lost sages. The evidence is more modest. Mesopotamians certainly developed elaborate omen traditions. Military decisions could involve divination, but a tired guard on a wall also relied on ordinary senses, training, and suspicion. The mysterious and the practical shared the same cold hour. Below the gate, a traveller may wait for entry. Perhaps he arrived too late in the night and was forced to remain outside until morning. That position is deeply uncomfortable. Inside the wall is society. Law, bread, water, and witnesses. Outside is exposure. A person outside the gate before dawn belongs to neither safety nor journey. He is suspended in the same borderland as the hour itself. You imagine him wrapped in a cloak, back against a cartwheel, trying not to sleep. His animals stand nearby. Goods are tied in bundles. Every rustle in the reed sounds expensive. He may pray quietly. He may curse the slow guards. He may promise himself never to misjudge distance again, which travellers have promised in every century and then ignored at the next opportunity. Trade mattered enormously to Sumer because southern Mesopotamia lacked many raw materials. Timber, metals, and stone often came from distant regions through exchange networks. Records and archaeological finds confirm connections reaching toward Anatolia, the Iranian plateau, the Gulf, and beyond. The city gate therefore received more than people. It received the wider world, carried in sacks, ingots, beads, wood, rumours, and diseases nobody had politely declared. That wider world made gates both necessary and frightening. Close them too tightly, and the city starves itself of exchange. Open them too freely, and danger enters with merchandise. The watchman's task is therefore symbolic as well as practical. He guards the line between connection and invasion. He must decide who belongs, who waits, who is questioned, and who remains a shape in the dark. The final hour before sunrise sharpens these decisions. A caravan may need entry before heat. A messenger may carry urgent news. A wounded man may plead at the gate. A fugitive may lie. A merchant may hide contraband. A spy may look exactly like a merchant, because spies have always understood the value of boring clothing. The watchman cannot know everything. He must judge with limited light. The sky begins to grey behind the plain. Shapes separate slowly. A low mound becomes a bush. A crouching figure becomes a jar. A line of enemies becomes, with some embarrassment, 3 goats. The guards relax by degrees, not all at once, dawn reveals, but it also corrects the imagination, and the imagination rarely apologizes. From the wall, the city behind you begins to stir. Smoke rises from rooftops, a child cries, a door bar scrapes. Somewhere inside, a baker wakes the fire. The city trusts the gate because the gate is held. That trust is invisible until it fails. Most forms of safety are like that. They feel ordinary only because someone spent the night being uncomfortable. A horn or call may sound, low and controlled. The gate workers prepare to open. Wood shifts, ropes tighten. The heavy bar is lifted from its brackets. The sound travels through the passage beneath you, deep and hollow. It is the sound of a city deciding to face the world again. The road becomes visible now. It stretches pale across the plain, marked by wheels, hooves, feet, and long habit. In the east, light touches the reed tops. The traveller outside the gate rises stiffly, trying to appear respectable despite having slept badly beside a donkey. The guards look down at him with the severe expression of men who have also slept badly, but with more official authority. The final hour before sunrise was feared on the walls because the city's skin was thinnest there. Beyond the gate lay trade, news, wealth, strangers, ambush, and exile. Within the gate lay sleeping bodies, stored grain, temple treasure, children, records, and the stubborn hope that walls could hold another day. The gate opens slowly. The road enters the city, and the watchmen keep looking outward, even as the morning begins. Above the dark plain, the stars begin to surrender their sharpness. You stand on a roof where the air is cool, and the city below still murmurs in its sleep. A reed mat lies rolled near the wall. A jar of water catches a weak reflection from the sky. The eastern edge is not yet bright, but the heavens have entered their final arrangement before daylight washes them away. This is the sky's quiet inventory. A watcher lifts his face. He is not gazing with empty wonder alone. Though wonder is present, he is counting, comparing, remembering, and perhaps worrying in a very professional manner. The stars are beautiful, which is inconvenient, because they are also work. Their rising, fading, clustering, and vanishing can be treated as signs. The night sky becomes a tablet written too high for human hands, but not too high for human anxiety. In Mesopotamia, careful observation of the heavens developed into one of the ancient world's most influential traditions. Later Babylonian scholars recorded planetary movements, lunar phases, eclipses, and omens, with remarkable precision. Major research from the history of science has shown that Mesopotamian astronomical records helped shape later Greek astronomy. The Sumerians stand near the earlier roots of this long tradition, in a world where sky watching and sacred interpretation were not separate paths. The stars are not decoration. They are witnesses. In the final hour before sunrise, the sky offers its last visible signs. A planet may gleam low in the east or west, brighter than the tired stars around it. A crescent moon may tilt above the horizon. A constellation may sink, leaving its place like a guest departing without farewell. To the trained observer, such movements matter because they repeat, vanish, return, and sometimes appear to fail expectation. You can feel why this hour matters. Soon daylight will erase the evidence. The stars are not destroyed. Of Korhan, they are merely hidden by brightness, which is a useful reminder that invisibility is not absence. Ancient people understood this without needing anyone to explain it gently over a diagram. The sky taught it every morning. A mainstream historical fact belongs here, like a bright point in darkness. Mesopotamian scholars eventually created detailed celestial omen series, connecting appearances of the moon, sun, planets, stars, and weather with events affecting kings, cities, harvests, and enemies. Although many surviving omen collections come from later periods, they preserve older habits of linking heavenly order with its earthly consequence. The basic assumption was powerful. What happens above may speak about what happens below. That idea can sound grand, but on the roof it feels personal. If a star fades strangely, does it concern the king or your child? If the moon appears dim, does it warn of storm, sickness, or defeat, or nothing at all? If a planet shines red near morning, should anyone be troubled, or is the sky simply being dramatic before breakfast? The ancient observer does not have the luxury of shrugging too easily. Meaning is demanding, especially before dawn. The watcher may carry memory more than instruments. He knows where a certain star should stand at this season. He knows when the moon should appear. He knows that the year moves through patterns, and that the work of farmers, priests, and rulers depends on marking time. Calendars are not cold inventions. They are survival tools. Planting, offerings, and festivals labor up with its obligations, and travel all require a shared understanding of days. Mesopotamian calendars were lunar, adjusted to the solar year through intercalation, the insertion of extra months when needed. Scholars continue to study how early cities managed calendrical systems because local practices and later standardization complicate the picture. The debate remains open over how uniform early Sumerian time reckoning was across different city-states. Some evidence suggests local variation, while broader administrative needs encouraged coordination. You stand beside the watcher and feel the difficulty. The moon does not obey neat human accounting every year without help. Seasons drift if months are not adjusted. Festivals wander. Farmers complain. Priests calculate. Officials correct records. Someone is blamed, because even celestial mechanics must eventually pass through administration. There is a quiet comedy in that. The moon creates paperwork, yet this comedy rests on a serious foundation. To predict time is to soften fear. If the crescent appears when expected, the world feels orderly. If a star returns to its place, memory is rewarded. If an eclipse can be anticipated, terror may be shaped into ritual preparation. The ancient sky was frightening not only because it was vast, but because it sometimes broke habit. Eclipses were especially powerful in Mesopotamian omen tradition. Later texts treated lunar and solar eclipses as grave signs, often concerning the king or the land. Modern scholars in journals devoted to ancient science and Near Eastern studies have shown that Babylonian astronomers achieved impressive predictive schemes over time. Yet fear did not simply vanish when prediction improved. Knowledge and dread can share the same roof quite comfortably. A fringe tidbit sparkles here, as fringe tidbits prefer starlight. Some modern theorists claim Sumerian star lore proves contact with advanced visitors from the sky. Mainstream historians reject that interpretation, seeing instead a long human tradition of observation, mythology, mathematics, and divination. Still, the appeal is understandable. When an ancient tablet tracks celestial events across generations, it feels almost impossible that ordinary humans achieved it by patience alone. But patience is one of humanity's strangest technologies. The roof grows lighter. The watcher's face becomes visible, lined for concentration rather than fear alone. He may not be an astronomer in the later technical sense. He may be a priestly observer, a scribe in training, a ritual specialist, or simply someone tasked with noticing what others sleep through. His work depends on memory, discipline, and the ability to stay awake when the body is making persuasive arguments against civilization. Below, a door opens, smoke lifts, a woman pours water into a basin, a child begins the daily complaint of being awake, a tradition as old as childhood, but above the rooftop, the watcher remains fixed on the sky. There is still time to observe the last star before the day claims it. The planet near the horizon glows steadily. It does not tremble like the lesser stars. Its brightness is almost too pure. Mesopotamian cultures would later associate planets with powerful deities, weaving their movements into omen systems and sacred interpretation. The details changed across time, but the principle remained luminous. The wandering lights mattered because they moved differently. They behave like persons with roots of their own. You can see how a system begins. First, a bright object returns, then someone remembers, then someone compares, then a scribe records, then an elder corrects the scribe, then a pattern is argued over by men who absolutely believe the fate of the land depends on whether a line was copied properly. From such human scenes, astronomy grows. The final hour before sunrise becomes a workshop of uncertainty. The sky is fading, so the observer must act now. A little later, the evidence will be gone. Time itself presses on the eye. The stars do not wait for perfect confidence. They vanish while people are still deciding what they mean. Perhaps that is why the Sumerians feared this hour. It was not only darkness below, but fading signs above. The heavens were still readable, but barely. Messages, if messages they were, had to be caught before daylight dissolved them. In that brief interval, the cosmos seemed to speak in a low voice, and humans strained to hear before the sound was lost. The eastern sky brightens. One star disappears, then another. The watcher keeps his gaze on the last visible point until it too becomes uncertain. The roof, the jar, the rolled mat, the parapet, and the distant temple all return to ordinary shape. The sky gives up its secret writing and becomes blue silence. The observer lowers his face. The tablet waits below, and the day begins with a question still unfinished. The first water poured before sunrise sounds different from water poured at noon. It is softer, more deliberate, as if each drop has been instructed to behave. You stand in a narrow courtyard where the stones are cool, the plaster walls are pale grey, and the smell of smoke still clings to the roof beams. A shallow bowl rests near the doorway. Beside it lies wool, a pinch of flour, a small vessel of oil, and a bundle of reeds tied with careful fingers. Ritual begins with ordinary things. That is its quiet genius. The Sumerians did not face the last darkness only with fear. They answered it with action, washing, fumigation, offerings, whispered formulas, knots, figurines, gestures, and food could become ways of pressing order back into a world that felt too open. A ritual was not always grand. It did not always need a towering temple or a crowd of singers. Sometimes it began with one person, one bowl, and one nervous hope. Ancient Mesopotamian incantation traditions are well attested in later written sources, and many scholars connect them to older patterns of ritual protection. Researchers at Yale, Chicago, and Oxford have studied how spoken formulas worked with physical materials, divine names, and symbolic actions. These practices aim to remove evil purify space, protect bodies, and restore the right relationship between human beings and the unseen powers around them. You watch a hand enter the bowl. Water touches skin. The person washes slowly, not because dirt alone is the issue, but because impurity can be imagined as something clinging to the body, the breath, the doorway, or the day itself. The water carries away more than dust. It carries away the feeling of contamination, the residue of a dream, the suspicion heard of contact with what should not follow a person into mourning. The courtyard is nearly silent. A faint line of light gathers above the eastern roofs, but the sun has not yet risen high enough to take command. In this pause, ritual action feels urgent. It is easier to bar a door before danger enters. It is easier to speak a protective word before the day begins. The final hour becomes a place where prevention matters. A mainstream historical fact sits among the ritual objects. Mesopotamian healing and protection often combined incantations with practical substances, including plants, oils, minerals, water, and prepared mixtures. Ancient medical texts show that healers might observe symptoms, prepare remedies, and perform spoken rites within one treatment. Major academic research has emphasized that this combination was not confused thinking within its own worldview. It was an integrated system of care. The reed bundle is it brushes the doorway. You hear the dry sound against wood and plaster. The movement marks the threshold, and thresholds require attention. The person may touch the lintel, the sides of the entrance, the ground beneath the feet. Perhaps the action drives away a hostile presence. Perhaps it invites protective powers inward. Perhaps it tells the household that the boundary has been noticed. And sometimes being noticed is the beginning of safety. A quirky fringe tidbit slips through the smoke with theatrical humility. Some modern ritual movements borrow Sumerian names and claim to revive exact ceremonies from the earliest cities. Historians are careful here, because surviving texts are fragmentary, often later, and difficult to place in everyday practice, yet the attraction is understandable. An ancient incantation feels like a rope dropped from deep time, even when the rope is frayed and partly imagined. The person in the courtyard speaks softly, but the words are not for performance. They move under the breath, shaped more for the unseen than for human listeners. Spoken language carries power in many ancient traditions, and Mesopotamia was no exception. A name could summon, define, command, or protect. A repeated line could steady the mind while claiming authority over fear. Words make boundaries too. A formula can say, "This may not enter." A divine name can say, "Someone stronger stands here." A ritual command can say, "Leave this body, leave this houses, leave this child, leave this bed." Whether one studies such words as theology, psychology, poetry, or social technology, their function is clear. They give shape to resistance. There is an open scholarly debate about who performed which rituals in early Mesopotamian life. Some rites belong to trained specialists attached to temples or elite households. Others may have been carried out by family members using inherited customs. Written tablets tend to preserve learned traditions more clearly than informal domestic practice. So the balance remains uncertain. The great archive speaks loudly, while the kitchen whispers. Still, you can sense both levels at work. A formal incantation priest may prepare a complex rite with precise materials and established language. A mother may tie a cord near a sleeping child. A farmer may wash before touching a field after a troubling dream. A merchant may carry a charm before leaving the gate. Ancient life did not require every protective act to be officially certified, which must have been a relief to people already burdened by enough officials. The flame in a small lamp bends as incense is added. Smoke rises, blue and thin, then gathers under the roof before slipping into the morning air. Smoke is perfect for ritual because it changes form while remaining visible. It touches spaces the hand cannot reach. It enters corners, crosses thresholds, climbs towards beams, and leaves scent behind like a memory that refuses to sit still. The scent is sharp, resinous, and slightly bitter. It coats the throat. You understand how smell can alter fear. A room that smells of sickness becomes a different room when filled with fragrant smoke. The senses are persuaded before the mind has finished judging. Ritual is often practical in this deep bodily way. It changes air, sound, touch, posture, and attention. A small offering is placed near the doorway or on a low surface. It may be food, oil, grain, or another prepared substance. Offerings in Mesopotamian religion sustained relationships with divine powers, whether in great temple service or smaller acts of devotion. To offer is to acknowledge dependency. It is also to open negotiation. Human beings cannot force the gods, but they can present, request, honour, and hope. Hope has a ritual grammar. It does not beg wildly. It arranges objects, cleanses hands, speaks names, and waits for the world to answer without promising that it will. This restraint gives ancient rites their quiet dignity, even when fear is strong. The action remains measured. The bowl is placed here. The oil is poured there, or the words are spoken in order. Panic becomes sequence. The eastern light grows. The courtyard wall turns from grey to beige. The objects become more visible, and with visibility comes a subtle change. The ritual has not proved that danger is gone. It has done something more human. It has allowed the day to begin under protection, not under helplessness. You watch the final gesture. Water is poured onto the ground, darkening the dust. The person touches the doorway once more. Perhaps they breathe out with relief. Perhaps they are still afraid. Ritual rarely erases fear completely. It teaches fear where to stand. The house behind the threshold begins to stir. A child yawns. A jar scrapes. Someone asks for bread with the solemn entitlement of the newly awake. The world returns to its practical demands, but the doorway has been marked, the hands washed, the smoke raised, the words released. This was one answer to the dreaded hour. Not certainty, not conquest, not allowed victory over darkness. Only careful acts performed while light was still fragile. Acts that said the house was not abandoned, the body was not undefended, and the morning would not enter unprepared. The sun touches the upper wall. The bowl is empty. The words remain in the air. The sky should comfort you now, but it does not. A grey light spreads over the roofs, and the city becomes visible in pieces. Walls return, doorways take their proper shapes, jars stop looking like crouched figures. Yet the air feels wrong. The morning has arrived, but something in it refuses to settle. A storm waits somewhere. You can smell it before you see it. The scent is sharp, mineral, and restless, carried across the plain from a distance beyond the city walls. Dust lifts in small movements along the street. A reed mat flaps once against a doorway, then hangs still, as if embarrassed by its own warning. The first light is thin and yellowed, not clean. It seems strained through a veil. In southern Mesopotamia, dawn was not always gentle. Dust storms, river floods, oppressive heat, disease, crop failure, and unusual celestial events could turn morning into a continuation of fear. Archaeological and environmental studies from major universities have shown that Mesopotamian life depended on unstable river systems, shifting climate pressures, salinity, and irrigation challenges. The land was generous but never obedient. It required negotiation every day. The sun can rise into danger. That is the cruel detail. You stand in an open court as the wind begins to move more strongly. Fine dust enters your mouth. It gathers at the corners of the eyes and settles on damp skin. A woman covers a basket. A man looks toward the canal with a frown that belongs to farmers in every century. Children are pulled indoors. The morning light, instead of revealing safety, reveals a sky of dull bronze. This kind of dawn would trouble a Sumerian household because it breaks expectation. Sunrise is supposed to restore order. When the sun appears dimmed, reddened, hidden by dust, or swallowed by cloud, the promised reassurance weakens. The feared hour spills forward. The boundary fails. Darkness does not leave politely. It lingers in the weather. Mesopotamian omen traditions paid attention to unusual atmospheric and celestial signs, including storms, strange colours, eclipses, winds, and cloud formations. Later scholarly collections linked such phenomena with the possible consequences for the king, the land, or crops, or enemies. A mainstream historical fact is clear. Ancient Mesopotamians treated the sky as a field of meaning, not merely a distant ceiling. What happened above could be read as a warning below. You hear thunder far away. It is low and slow. The sound travels across the plain like a cart dragged through heaven. In a modern bedroom, thunder may feel atmospheric, even cosy. In a city of mudbrick, canals, livestock, and stored grain, it carries practical questions. Will rain damage walls? Will floodwater rise? Will lightning strike dry reeds? Will roads vanish into mud? Will a roof leak precisely above the one basket everyone meant to move yesterday? Ancient fear is often sensible. A storm is not just a symbol. It can tear up buildings, ruin supplies, frighten animals, delay travel, and change the day's work. But in Mesopotamian imagination, storm power also belonged to divine force. Winds could be messengers, weapons, or expressions of anger. When weather arrived at dawn, it could feel as if the world had woken in a bad temper, and everyone had to discover who offended it. A quirky fringe tidbit blows in with the dust. Some modern catastrophe theorists read every ancient storm or darkened sunrise as evidence of comet impacts, planet crossings, or lost global disasters. Scholars are more careful. Ancient texts use storm imagery both literally and poetically, especially to describe war, divine wrath, and city destruction. Yet the emotional truth remains strong. To people under a darkened morning sky, the heavens could seem to be falling in slow motion. There is an open scholarly debate about how environmental stress shaped Sumerian history, especially regarding salinity, drought, river shifts, and political decline. Some researchers emphasize ecological pressures as major factors in changing settlement and agriculture. Others caution that political conflict and trade changes, administrative strain, and local variation must also be considered. The land did not act alone, but it certainly had a voice in the argument. The wind rises. Dust sweeps along the street, soft at first, then harder. A potter curses and covers unfired vessels. A baker shields the oven mouth. A temple attendant pulls a cloth across an entrance to keep grit from sacred vessels. Though dust is famously indifferent to hierarchy, it enters houses, courts, nostrils, storerooms, and sacred corners with equal democratic enthusiasm. Morning becomes work immediately. There is no golden pause. Then another kind of failed comfort enters the imagination. An eclipse. Not every dawn, not every year, but rare enough to become unforgettable. Imagine the sun rising and then dimming unnaturally, or the moon darkening in a night already heavy with signs. Later, Mesopotamian scholars tracked eclipses with care and treated them as powerful omens, often concerning kingship. Even when prediction became possible, dread remained, because knowing when a door opens does not tell you what stands behind it. In the city, people watch the sky, some understand more than others. A trained observer may notice timing and direction, colour and duration. An ordinary worker may simply feel cold fear in the stomach. A child may ask why the sun looks sick. A mother may answer too quickly, because children have a talent for placing fingers directly on cosmic discomfort. The sun should be strong, instead it looks wounded. Disease can also make dawn fail. A fevered person who survives the night may not recover with daylight. The room brightens, and the face on the bedding looks worse. Redness, swelling, cough, pain, or delirium becomes easier to see. The final hour has passed, yet the danger has not. Morning can be merciless because it clarifies what darkness allowed hope to blur. Mesopotamian medical texts often describe symptoms carefully, while also linking illness to divine displeasure. Demons, curses, or impurity. This blend of observation and ritual interpretation shows that sickness was both bodily and meaningful within ancient teleport. Healers could prepare remedies, speak incantations, and identify causes through signs. The body was read like a tablet, though much harder to erase and rewrite. You enter a house where dawn has revealed a fever. The patient's breathing is shallow. A bowl of water sits nearby, warmed by the room despite the hour. Someone has opened the doorway for air. Someone else regrets opening it because dust has entered. The family's faces are drawn with sleeplessness. Their fear has crossed from night into day without asking permission. Perhaps a specialist will be called. Perhaps offerings will be promised. Perhaps herbs will be prepared. Perhaps the family will simply wait, because even the most elaborate civilization contains many moments where waiting is all that remains. The Sumerians feared darkness, but they also knew light could reveal suffering rather than remove it. Outside, the storm edge passes near the city. A strange yellow glow fills the street. Roof lines blur. The temple platform appears larger through dust, like a mountain seen in a dream. People continue their tasks because life rarely pauses for dread. Grain must be protected. Animals must be tied. Doors must be checked. The sick must be watched. Officials, tragically, may still expect reports. The final darkness has ended, yet its uncertainty has changed form. It is now weather, illness, eclipse, memory, crop anxiety, and the unsettled colour of the sky. This is why sunrise could fail to comfort. The sun's return was powerful, but not absolute. It gave sight, not safety. It revealed the world, but the world could still be wounded. You stand as dust settles on your hands. The light strengthens slowly behind the veil. Somewhere, thunder moves away. Somewhere else, a child laughs because children are unreasonable blessings in troubled weather. The city continues beneath a sky that has not explained itself. Morning has come, fear remains awake, and the Sumerians would have understood that sometimes the most frightening dawn is the one that arrives, looks upon the world, and offers no answer at all. The world begins to look like a system when you stop staring at one fear and let the whole pattern appear. You stand in the pale morning between temple, house, field, gate, and sky, and the pieces slowly arrange themselves. The final hour before sunrise is not one superstition, one demon, one dream, or one nervous priest. It is a structure. A hidden clock turns, not a clock of metal. Of course, no ticking face hangs on a wall. The Sumerian world measures time through shadows, stars, water, work, song, ritual, and repetition. Dawn is not just a point in the day, it is a passage from one state of existence into another. Night withdraws. The sun returns. The household wakes. The city opens. The fields are inspected. The gods receive service, and the living confirm that they are still among the living. This is why the hour feels crowded. Every layer of life touches it at once. The body returns from sleep. The house opens its door. The gate admits strangers. The field reveals damage. The sky loses its signs. The temple restores divine order. The king seeks approval. The dead sink back beneath memory. It is not merely mourning. It is a daily reconstruction of the world. Ancient Mesopotamian civilization was deeply patterned by cycles, including agricultural seasons, lunar months, temple festivals, royal duties, and repeated ritual observances. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford and Yale and the University of Chicago have shown how calendars, offerings, labor systems, and religious ceremonies helped organize society. Time was not empty space through which people wandered. It was filled with duties, dangers, and sacred appointments. You can almost see the layers. At the highest level, heaven holds the moving lights. Beneath it stand the gods, who command, judge, withdraw, bless, or remain silent. Beneath them, kings and priests attempt to maintain proper relations. Beneath them, households grind grain, nurse infants. guard doors, and remember the dead beneath the ground the underworld waits, dusty and ordered. Between every layer are thresholds, and thresholds require care. That may be the forgotten system. It is not a machine. It is a set of relationships that must be kept from fraying. Light must return, the water must flow, offerings must be made, words must be spoken, names must be remembered, fields must be repaired, bodies must wake, doors must hold. If any one part weakens, anxiety spreads through the whole arrangement. A mainstream historical fact can be placed within this design. The Sumerians developed some of the earliest known forms of urban administration: writing, monumental temple architecture, and organised labour in the late 4th and 3rd millennia before the Common Era. Archaeological work at sites like Uruk, and Nippur has shown how religious, economic, and political structures became intertwined. The city itself became an instrument for managing life at a scale earlier villages had never known. But large systems create large fears. A village fears hunger, illness, and violence. A city fears those things too. Then add storage failure, canal collapse, labour unrest, temple neglect, royal defeat, divine anger, bad omens, and the possibility that the entire arrangement is more delicate than its walls suggest. Complexity is impressive, but it also gives fear more rooms to explore. The final hour before sunrise exposes that delicacy. In darkness, the system is still present, but less visible. The temple platform stands, but its god is unseen. The canals run, but their banks cannot be checked. The king rules, but his face is hidden. The tablets record, but no one reads them in the street. The walls protect, but the road beyond them is a black uncertainty. The household sleeps, but sleep resembles absence. A quirky fringe tidbit arrives with the confidence of someone who has watched too many mysterious documentaries without enough breakfast. Some modern writers claim the Sumerians preserved a coded memory of a complete cosmic operating system taught by non-human beings. Mainstream scholarship does not support that claim. Yet the attraction of the idea reveals something important. Sumerian culture did imagine existence as ordered by divine plans, repeated patterns, banked powers, sacred numbers, and relationships between heaven and earth. The real system is human and divine together. That is strange enough. You turn toward a scribal tablet. It might contain a list of offerings, a hymn, a school exercise, a legal note, or an omen. Each kind of text belongs to order. Lists order goods, hymns order praise, laws order disputes, omens order uncertainty, laments order grief. Incantations order fear. Writing does not merely remember the world, it arranges it. An arrangement is one of humanity's oldest defences against terror. There is an open scholarly debate about whether early Mesopotamian religion should be understood mainly through mythic narrative, ritual practice, temple economy, political ideology, or household devotion. Different sources emphasize different realities. A royal inscription presents one world, a ration tablet presents another, a burial presents another, a hymn presents another. The challenge is that all of them are true in their own way, and none of them alone is complete. That incompleteness suits the final hour. Before sunrise, nothing stands alone. A dream may affect a household may call a specialist may invoke a god may be tied to a temple may be tied to a city may be tied to a king, and the king may be tied to the sun's judgment. The chain is long, and perhaps that is what makes the darkness heavy. One small sign can seem to tug the whole cosmos. You hear the city begin its daily arrangement. Doors open, feet cross thresholds, water is drawn, bread is prepared, animals complain. A scribe probably searches for a stylus, he himself misplaced, because civilization does not cure this behaviour. Sibir. The temple attendants continue their service, workers move toward canals, guards look down roads, mothers adjust cloth around children. The system resumes through thousands of small motions, or no single person commands all of it. Even a king cannot hold the entire morning in his hand. Order is distributed and superseded across labour. Belief, habit, fear, memory and environment. That is the genius and the vulnerability of Sumerian life. The city works because everyone participates in making the world ordinary again. The hidden timeline appears here, not as a secret race of lost kings, but as a repeated daily creation. Long before recorded history, human beings learned that darkness returns. Long before cities, they learned that morning must be awaited. In Sumer, that old human rhythm became urban, theological, administrative, and cosmic, and the final hour was still ancient fear, but dressed in the garments of civilization. Perhaps the Sumerians feared it because it reminded them of beginnings. Before creation, there is formlessness. Before the city wakes, there is suspension. Before the sun rises, there is an older darkness. Not evil exactly, but unarranged. The last hour returns the world to the edge of that first uncertainty. Then dawn must separate, reveal, name, and assign again. The sky grows brighter. The stars have vanished. The temple wall shines faintly. The canal reflects a pale strip of light. The gate opens wider. The field workers become small figures in a great design they do not fully see. Above them, the sun approaches its throne. Beneath them, the dead remain quiet. Around them, the city gathers itself into day. The system holds, for now, and within that small phrase lies the whole ancient tension. The world has survived the hour, but survival is never final. Night will return, doors will close, lamps will tremble, dreams will rise, priests will listen, mothers will wake, watchers will climb the walls. The pattern will begin again, because order in Sumers is not a possession, it is a practice. You stand in the strengthening light and understand the slow-hidden truth. The final hour before sunrise was feared because it revealed the machinery beneath existence. Not gears and wheels, but obligations, borders, cycles, and fragile agreements between the seen and unseen. When darkness thinned, the Sumerians could feel the whole structure waiting to be renewed, and morning at last becomes the act of holding it together. The first warmth touches your face, and the city begins to reveal the place assigned to human beings, not at the summit, not beneath everything, but somewhere in the uneasy middle. Above are gods, stars, decrees, and the bright authority of the sun. Below are ancestors, dust, foundations, and the silent country of the dead. Between these powers stands humanity, barefoot on clay, carrying water, grain, names, fear, and hope. It is a humble position. It is also immense in Sumerian thought. Human beings often appear as servants of the gods, created or appointed to maintain divine order through labour, offerings, and ritual care. Later Mesopotamian myths speak more directly of humans being made to relieve divine beings from toil. Earlier Sumerian compositions show a world where gods possess cities, temples require service, and human work sustains the sacred household. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have often noted that labour and worship cannot be separated neatly in this tradition. You stand near a workyard as people gather for the day. A man lifts a basket. A woman balances a jar. A child trails behind someone important to him and probably asks a question at the least useful moment. A scribe checks a tablet. A temple worker carries provisions toward a sacred space. Each movement seems ordinary, yet within the Sumerian imagination, ordinary labour belongs to cosmic maintenance. That's a strange dignity. A person may not choose the season, the flood, the omen, the king, the sword, or the hour of birth. But a person can carry grain to the proper place. A person can repair a canal bank. A person can grind barley, shape brick, tend animals, pour water, sing a lament, wash a vessel, speak a name, and keep a door closed against the night. Humanity's role is not absolute control, it is faithful participation. The final hour before sunrise makes that role clearer because human weakness is still visible. Sleep has only just released the body. Dreams still cling to the mind. The sky is not fully settled into day, and yet work begins. This is the quiet bravery of ancient life. Not heroic in the polished statue sense, but stubborn in the way clay is stubborn when shaped and dried. People rise because rising is required. A mainstream historical fact belongs to this human position. Administrative tablets from Sumerian cities record rations, labour groups, temple holdings, deliveries, and work assignments in great detail. These texts show that many people lived within organised systems of obligation, often connected to large households, temples, or palaces. Modern scholars have used such records to reconstruct social structure, gendered labour, economic dependency, and the daily scale of institutional power. The tablets count workers. They do not fully show weariness. They record barley rations, but not the aching up shoulder after carrying baskets under the sun. They preserve names, but not every private worry tied to those names. They show that people served institutions, but not exactly how each person understood service. Was it oppression, duty, piety, survival, identity, or all of those mingled together like dust in canal water? The evidence invites care. There is an open, scholarly debate about the nature of labour in early Mesopotamian temple and palace economies. Some researchers emphasise dependence, inequality, and coercive organisation. Others point to complex arrangements involving ration support, skilled work, family participation, seasonal duty, and social belonging. The safest reading is not a soft one. Sumerian society could be hierarchical and demanding, yet it also relied on forms of cooperation that gave people roles within a shared world. You watch a line of workers move toward the fields. They are not faceless. One limps slightly. One laughs quietly at something another has said. One carries a tool with the care of someone who knows. Tools disappear when borrowed by cousins. Their labour supports temple offerings, royal projects, household survival, and future harvests. History often praises kings for canals, but mud remembers the hands. A fringe tidbit rises from that mud with predictable flair. Some modern alternative writers claim Sumerian myths about human creation prove that people were engineered as labourers by beings from the stars. Mainstream scholarship reads these myths within ancient theology, social memory, and reflections on work, mortality, and divine hierarchy. Yet the mythic question remains powerful. Why are humans here, if so much of life is toil? The Sumerian answer is not sentimental. Humans are not placed in a garden of endless leisure. They are placed in a world that requires service. Food must be produced. Temples must be maintained. The gods must be honoured. Cities must be defended. The dead must be remembered. Children must be protected. Order is heavy, and humanity carries part of its weight. That sounds severe. Perhaps it is. Yet there is tenderness hidden inside the severity. To be needed by the world is also to matter. If no human hand pours water, prepares bread, repairs the bank, teaches the child, buries the dead, or sings the lament, then the world becomes poorer. The Sumerian human may be small before the gods, but not meaningless. Service becomes a form of presence. You enter a courtyard where bread is being made. The dough is worked by hand. The smell is warm, sour, and comforting. Rising through smoke from an oven, grain grown by farmers, measured by scribes, stored by institutions, and assigned by authority becomes food in the mouth. It is easy to speak of cosmic order in grand terms. It is better to notice that cosmic order often smells like bread before sunrise. A woman turns a loaf with practiced speed. She does not pause to contemplate the metaphysics of barley, which is probably wise. Still, her motion belongs to the same system as temple offering and royal account. The gods eat through ritual, humans eat through beru. Animals eat through care. The city survives because food moves from field to storehouse to oven to hand. In that movement, humanity's role becomes visible. People are mediators. They transform earth into bricks, grain into bread, wool into cloth, sound into song, fear into ritual, and memory into names. They stand between raw nature and ordered life. They do not abolish danger, they shape responses to it. The final hour before sunrise frightens because it shows how easily those transformations could fail. If people do not wake, fields are not tended. If rituals are neglected, divine relations are fray. If names are forgotten, the dead become lonely. If doors are unguarded, harm enters. If kings misuse power, cities suffer, human beings are fragile. But the order of the world still passes through their hands. You look toward the temple platform glowing in the strengthening light. Its height may suggest divine permanence, but it was built brick by brick. Every impressive structure rests on repeated human effort. Even the most sacred building requires someone to mix clay, haul loads, replace damaged surfaces, and clean rooms no hymn mentions. The gods may command awe, but the broom is also a theological instrument, if one is tired enough to be honest. The morning fills with sound now, grinding stones, animal calls, footsteps, water jars, low voices, a child laughing at something invisible to adults. As children tend to do with suspicious confidence, the city becomes human again, not because fear has vanished, but because action has resumed. Perhaps the hidden truth is that Sumerian people did not fear the final hour only as victims of darkness. They feared it as caretakers of order. They knew that the world they inhabited had to be renewed through labour, attention, memory, and reverence, or how the gods might hold the great powers, but humans held the morning tasks. And without those tasks, this daylight would find only ruins. The sun rises higher, shadows shorten, the body warms, the dream fades. The worker bends, the mother feeds, the priest serves, the scribe writes, the farmer watches the canal, the gate receives the road. Humanity stands in the middle of everything, neither master nor dust alone, carrying the fragile agreement forward with both hands. The fear that remains is not trapped in ancient clay. It crosses time more quietly than armies, slipping through sleep, through worry, through the strange cold hour when a person wakes before morning and cannot explain why the room feels altered. You stand in the growing light of Sumer, yet something familiar moves near you, not a demon with a name, not a god with a temple, a feeling. It has survived very well. The city is awake now, but the unease has not vanished completely. It has only changed clothing. It hides inside tasks, inside glances, inside the small silence after someone mentions a troubling dream. It follows the farmer to the canal, the mother to the hearth, the guard down from the wall, and the scribe to his tablet. Morning gives everyone work, but work does not always erase what darkness placed in the mind. You know this feeling too. Perhaps not in mudbrick streets, and perhaps not beneath the same stars, yet the hour before sunrise still unsettles many people. A modern room can be comfortable, lit by machines, warmed by electricity, sealed by glass, and still feel strangely exposed at 4 a.m. The mind wakes before the world does. Thoughts become heavier, small fears grow long shadows, the body lies still, but the heart begins its old labour. Ancient Sumer makes that modern anxiety visible in older form. Their fears had gods, omens, demons, dreams, thresholds, and rituals. Modern fears may have schedules, messages, debts, diagnoses, unanswered calls, and the delightful little horror of remembering something embarrassing from 12 years ago. The names change, the hour remains. A mainstream historical fact supports this continuity carefully. Sleep researchers at major universities have shown that human sleep passes through cycles, and that awakenings in the early morning can be linked with vivid dreams. Stress and heightened emotional processing. Historians cannot place modern sleep science directly into Sumerian heads, of course, but the bodily experience is shared across humanity. People wake in darkness, and the mind searches for meaning. That search may be our oldest inheritance. You walk through a Sumerian street now bright enough to show ordinary life. A woman shakes dust from cloth. A man carries a basket with the resigned posture of someone who's carried many baskets and expects no statue. Two children chase each other between doorways until an adult voice ends civilization's first recorded fun. At least for the moment, the city is practical again. Still, the final hour leaves a residue. The person who woke from a dream remembers. One image too clearly. The guard remembers the sound from the road. The mother remembers the gap between one breath and the next. The priest remembers the lamp that bent without wind. None of these memories may become official history, but they shape the day in small ways. Fear is often quiet like that. It does not always shout. It may cause someone to make an offering, delay a journey, speak gently to a child, check a canal twice, ask a specialist about a dream, or avoid a doorway where something felt wrong. Ancient fear is not only belief, it becomes behaviour. It moves feet, hands, mouths, and decisions. There is an open scholarly debate about how historians should interpret ancient fear without either mocking it or romanticising it. Some researchers stress that beliefs in demons, omens, and divine anger must be understood within their cultural logic. Others emphasise practical realities, such as illness, infant mortality, warfare, and environmental instability. The most generous approach holds both together. The supernatural language and the material danger belong to one lived world. This is important because ancient people were not less intelligent than modern people. They lacked certain technologies and scientific frameworks, but they possessed observation, memory, emotional depth, and practical skill. They built cities, wrote texts, managed fields, argued cases, composed laments, and tracked the sky. Their fear before sunrise was not evidence of foolishness. It was evidence of attention. Attention can become fear when the world is uncertain, and their world was uncertain. A quirky fringe tidbit appears like a final stubborn star. Some modern mystery traditions imagine that Sumerian fear before dawn came from secret knowledge of cycles of destruction, hidden beings, or cosmic resets remembered from a lost age. Scholarship does not support such claims as literal history. Yet, the metaphor lingers because every society carries some fear that its order is temporary. In that sense, all civilizations live before sunrise, waiting to learn whether their arrangements will hold. You look at the temple platform in morning light, its bricks are visible now, and their human texture matters. It is not smooth eternity, it is layered effort. The building stands because people made it stand, and because people continue to care for it. One day it will fall. One day wind, abandonment, conquest, flood, salt, and time will reduce it to a mound. Yet in this moment, it rises over the city, and people trust it. That trust is moving. It is also fragile. Modern life has its own temple platforms, hospitals, banks, courts, power grids, calendars, screens, laws, schools, markets, and quiet routines that tell us the world will still work when we wake. Most mornings they do. But in the hour before dawn, trust can loosen. The mind asks what holds everything together. The answer, ancient or modern, is never as solid as we wish. Perhaps this is why Sumer feels so close. They lived in the first great experiments of urban life, among canals, walls, temples, accounts, labour systems, and stories older than their own memory. They were learning what it means for many human lives to depend on invisible arrangements, water rights, divine favour, stored grain, written records, family names, proper rituals, guarded gates. These are not just institutions, they are promises. The final hour before sunrise tests promises. It asks whether the child still breathes, whether the wall still holds, whether the god still listens, whether the field still stands, whether the king still has favour, whether the dead remain quiet, whether the sun will return without condition. Every morning that arrives answers yes, but only for one day. You sit near a doorway as light fills the street. The terror is softer now, almost sleepy. It has lost its sharp teeth, but not its memory. Perhaps this is the exact feeling that makes the Sumerians so haunting. Their world is distant, but their vulnerability is not. You do not need to believe in their demons to understand the doorway. You do not need to share their omens to understand the dream. You do not need to worship their sun god to understand the relief of light. Human beings are creatures of thresholds. We wait at doors, at bedsides, at borders, at test results, at messages, at dawn. We live between what has happened and what may happen. The Sumerians gave that in-between world names, rites, songs, and tablets. We give it other names, but the shape is familiar. The morning continues, the city grows louder, someone laughs, someone argues, someone begins a task badly, and will improve only after being corrected with unnecessary enthusiasm. Life returns in all its beautiful, irritating detail. Fear retreats, not defeated, but temporarily outnumbered. The final hour before sunrise remains inside the day like a shadow under a jar. It reminds you that civilization begins again each morning, not as a triumph, but as a practice. The Sumerians feared that hour because they knew the world was held together by attention, and attention falters most easily when light has not yet arrived. You breathe with the city. The sun climbs. The old unease grows quiet, but it does not disappear. The sun finally lifts above the edge of the plain, and the world does not change all at once. It changes by surfaces. First the reed tops brighten, then the upper bricks of the temple glow, then the roof lines sharpen, then the canal gathers a trembling strip of gold, broken by ripples, insects, and the slow passage of water that has carried every human hope in this land. Light arrives gently, yet it arrives with authority. You stand in the street as morning enters the city through every opening. It slides beneath reed screens, it touches clay bowls, it finds the rims of jars, the edges of sleeping mats, the eyes of animals, the hands of people who have already begun to work. The final darkness loses its shape, its corners thin, its imagined figures withdraw into ordinary objects, slightly embarrassed by daylight, though not entirely defeated. The hour that frightened the Sumerians has passed, but its meaning remains scattered everywhere. It remains in the door bar, still resting near the wall. It remains in the bowl emptied after washing. It remains in the child lifted toward milk. It remains in the field worker bending over a canal bank. It remains in the guard blinking down the road. It remains in the temple singer whose voice has gone quiet, though the song still vibrates behind the ribs. The city has survived another passage. That survival is not small. A mainstream historical fact settles into the morning, like dust turning visible in light. Sumerian cities endured through repeated cycles of growth, rivalry, rebuilding, flood, drought, conquest, and cultural transformation. Archaeologists and historians from major research institutions have shown that places such as Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, and Nippur were not frozen monuments, but changing communities with long lives and layered memories. Their ruins preserve continuity and disruption together. The light reveals that truth in brick. One wall is repaired with newer mud. One threshold is worn lower than the floor around it. One courtyard has been swept, reswept, damaged, and used again. A city is not built once. It is maintained against time. Morning is part of that maintenance, because every day asks the people inside it to begin again. You walk toward the temple platform, now touched by full sunlight. Its mass is no longer a black shape against stars. It is clay, labour, height, and intention. The sacred mountain of the flatland stands visible, and with visibility comes a calmer kind of awe. Darkness made it ominous, daylight makes it demanding. It still asks for offerings, repairs, songs, records, and bodies carrying goods up and down its approaches. There is an open scholarly debate about how modern people should understand Sumerian religion across such long periods and varied cities. Some scholars stress local cults, temple institutions, and political identity. Others look toward broader myths, household practice, scribal tradition, and long Mesopotamian continuity. The evidence speaks in many voices, because the ancient world itself spoke in many voices. The final hour before sunrise belongs to all of them, yet to none completely. Perhaps that is why it resists a hard conclusion. Fear before dawn was not one doctrine. It was an atmosphere formed from environment, theology, biology, memory, and social life. It belonged to darkness and disease, but also to law and justice. It belonged to infants and kings, to farmers and priests, to guards and scribes, to the dead below and the stars above. It was a time when every border became noticeable. A quirky fringe thought lingers at the edge of the sun. Some still imagine that Sumer hid a lost revelation about beings before humanity, vanished rulers, or a secret calendar of doom. The evidence does not require that story, and careful history should not pretend otherwise. Yet the hunger behind such ideas tells its own truth. The Sumerians seem to stand near a doorway in human memory, close to the beginning of cities, writing, and recorded longing. They feel ancient enough to know something. Maybe they did. Not a secret map to impossible visitors. Perhaps, and not a final answer locked inside a tablet. Their knowledge may have been more intimate and more severe. They knew that civilization is fragile. They knew that darkness changes the mind. They knew that order must be practiced through labour, ritual, memory, and care. They knew that the sun returns daily, but certainty does not. You pause beside a wall where sunlight has begun to warm the clay. The texture is rough, ridged by straw, fingerprints, repairs, and time. The wall is both humble and profound. It was made by human hands from River Earth. It held heat through the day and cold through the night. It protected sleepers from wind, strangers, animals, and imagined things. It will one day crumble back into the soil from which it came. Everything here returns. Water returns to the river. Dust returns to brick. Brick returns to mound. Names return to silence unless someone speaks them. Fear returns with night. Light returns with morning. The Sumerian world is filled with return, but no return is simple repetition. Each dawn is familiar, and each dawn arrives after a different darkness. The people around you do not stop to admire the philosophy of it. They have grain to grind, animals to feed, debts to settle, offerings to deliver, and children to manage before the children manage everyone else. That may be the truest ending. The cosmic drama resolves into breakfast, labour, argument, and dust. The gods may judge, and the stars may vanish, the underworld may wait, but someone still has to find the missing basket. This ordinary return does not cheapen the mystery, it deepens it. Ancient life was not mysterious because it was distant and strange. It was mysterious because it held the sacred inside repetition. The same sun rose again and again, yet each morning carried the weight of survivals. The same door opened again and again, yet each opening trusted the world once more. The same body woke again and again, yet each waking crossed the border from absence into breath. The fear of the final hour before sunrise fades now into a wider understanding. The Sumerians feared it because it was the last unproven moment. It was the place where the night still had a claim, where dreams still spoke, where the dead still felt near, where signs faded above, where households listened, and where the sun had not yet declared the world visible. Now the declaration has come, not as thunder, as light on clay. You look back across the city. Smoke rises in thin blue lines. Birds move over the canal. The temple shines. The fields wait. The road beyond the gate stretches outward. pale and uncertain, as every road must be. The final hour has ended, but the question it carried remains suspended in the warming air. What holds the world together while we sleep? Perhaps the Sumerians answered with the gods. Perhaps they answered with ritual. Perhaps they answered with their work, memory, and careful attention. Perhaps they answered differently in every house. And perhaps, as the sunlight spreads over the ancient plain, the story is not yet complete. Now let the morning soften further, not as a command to wake, but as a kindness. The feared hour has passed from the city and from your listening mind, leaving only the slow warmth of light on brick, the faint movement of water, and the steady breath of people returning to themselves. You do not need to solve the darkness tonight. You only need to know that others waited inside it long before you, with oil lamps, whispered words, tired hands, and the same quiet hope that morning would come. Let the fields widen in your imagination. Let the canal carry away the last sharp thought. Let the temple grow smaller behind you, not abandoned, only resting in distance. The city becomes a soft mound beneath the sun, layered with names, songs, footsteps, meals, fears, and dreams. Nothing asks for an answer now. The old tablets remain silent. The reeds move gently and the sky is pale and open. Your breathing can follow that slow river. In, like light entering a doorway. Out, like dust settling after footsteps. In, like the first warmth on a sleeping face. Out, like the last shadow leaving a wall. The Sumerians feared the final hour, but they also endured it, again and again, until fear became ritual, and ritual became memory, and memory became the story carried here. So rest with that ancient city fading into gold, rest with the watchman relieved, the mothers calmer, the workers moving toward the fields, and the sun standing over all things without hurry, that the darkness has not been conquered forever. It never is, but for now, it has loosened its hand. And perhaps that is enough for sleep. Good night!